Travis is on this one.
I'm going to see if I can find Diana.
Is somebody online or listening? Yeah?
I don't know.
I can just hear you being.
It was a little,
Oh,
I just heard me.
oh. So it's an echo?
Echo.
No, but would you tell Jerry that we can hear the committee?
Oh, which one?
This one.
Sorry, it's just an
It's
echo.
echoing through the sound system. So I think we were so swift with that, we don't have Diana in here yet. Should we move to
What's
A3?
the next? What's the next?
Yeah, 8.
Okay, let's go to 3.1, which is our assessment to achievement. And as you recall, this
In case you miss it the first time.
this item was on our agenda last month. We had some discussion on it, and we asked that staff go back and do some interviews with those who were involved. They have completed those interviews, and we are going to be looking at continuing this program for those who want it. As in reviewing, that is so weird.
Gonna test our patience.
I'm gonna start stuttering here. Pretty soon.
You already are.
In reviewing the materials that were given to us,
Got it? As we came from the assessment accountability section last month to request that we'd be allowed to use some of our federal funds to redistribute those and use those to continue to support, especially our cohort 2 schools that have been participating in the assessment to achievement program. We were, as you said, directed to survey and find out how many principals were really interested in that continued support. In board docs, on the attachment labeled A2A project extension, you'll find the results of the survey, and it's fairly lengthy. I want to focus on page 3. As we sent that out, we sent it to the building principals in cohort 1 and cohort 2 schools just to get a feel of what their experiences were. We had 43, at the bottom of that page it talks about, we had 43 principals of the 66 responded to the survey. So we did have some principals that didn't respond. We treated those as principals that weren't interested, and so there's an assumption that's been made there. We found overwhelming support for that. In fact, to the 3 individuals in this room who introduced themselves as building principals, as we surveyed, they became aware that this was a possibility and have chosen to take their time today to come from their work and their responsibilities in case you have questions that you'd like to ask them specifically. And I would like to point out it's a sacrifice for all of them, but for Tracy to come from Kanab to be able to answer questions that you might have about his experience and his teacher's experiences with A2, I think says quite a bit for their interest. And so on that page 3, in that document that I directed you to, the first item there, that we would request $360,000. So when we came last month, it was I think $420,000 we were asking for. As we conducted the survey, we were able to see that there are some schools that are not interested in continuing to finish out the program, and so we were able to reduce the scope of that program under the original contract to be able to address the needs that have come in. We've also identified some things that they would like to have changed. So Board Member Gravitz, you talked about the concern in your school with being out of school
I saw that.
too much, and so we've made a recommendation that we reduce the number of during the school year trainings by half, which was also feedback that we got in the survey. that we participated. So on that 360,000 though, those 60 schools, some of those are cohort 1 schools that would like additional continued support through their 4th year. I would like to remind the board that the intention of A2A again is to build capacity at the local level, and so there's not a perception at the local level that this is ongoing forever, right? It's just a program that's designed to go through 3 years with an additional year of support to where the local LEA then can provide that at their level and not require additional assistance from the board, from the state legislature. I would like to note that I found out on Monday there was $1 million ongoing funding allocated by the legislature for assessment to achievement. I don't know what the parameters of that allocation are. I don't know if it's tied to a specific bill. I think it was just inserted into the budget. And I don't know whether those funds have to be used to bring in new schools moving forward. I've talked to Zach and Faye in our purchasing office. So there's a possibility that we could use some of those funds to meet this request, that we're coming to you with, that 360,000, and not have to reallocate funds within our section. But I don't know the answer to that right now. I'm still worried that $1 million will have to go through an RFP process, which will take some time, and that if we don't go forward with this request out of the budget from assessment accountability, that will pull the carpet out from underneath some of these schools that were expecting, with their commitment to the board when they signed up for this program, to have an additional year of support, that they won't get that. So I still am making the request that we be allowed to use some of our federal funds, this $360,000, to continue to provide support next school year for these 60 schools.
Okay. I think we have a little time. If the principals would like to take a couple of minutes each and address this, if one of you would like to come forward or introduce yourself to us again, would you please?
My name is Jake Hunt, and I'm the principal at Lincoln Academy. Thank you for allowing me to come up this morning and express some of the great things that have happened at my school as a result of A2A. This is our 3rd year as a member of A2A. Over the past 2 years, we have increased our proficiency in each of our tested areas 7 to 10%, depending on the year, since the project began. A lot of that comes from, we had a PLC structure in place at our school, a professional learning committee, community in place, but we weren't really effective in that process. We didn't really, I don't know if we knew how to be effective, and what Assessment to Achievement allowed us to do is allowed us to learn how to become effective, how to give easy, common assessments on a regular basis, and kind of put a structure into our professional learning work, which has made a huge difference and helped us increase those student outcome results. If you were to go back about 3 years ago, we were in the 60th percentile in the state, looking at school grading, school grade rankings. Last year we ended up in the 95th percentile and have made significant growth based upon looking at really understanding how to analyze data and implement that in our classroom. Going along with that is a big focus on having an evidence-based learning and instructional strategy happening in our classroom on a regular basis. And over the course of the past 3 years, we've really delved into understanding how to implement these strategies within the classroom school-wide. We have teachers that are out observing other teachers, doing this, getting feedback, which is going to be stronger than administrative feedback because it's a peer-to-peer feedback. They understand what they're going through on a daily basis and give feedback that they'll implement readily within your classroom. I think one of the biggest helps, especially as a charter school principal for me, is that it's an additional resource for us to be able to just call and say, hey, we're struggling with this. Can you give us some ideas on how to tackle this issue at our school? Or there's professional development that's tailored to meet the needs of our school. I've attended conferences before and have been motivated and tried to implement change. But what I really appreciate about Assessment to Achievement is it's an ongoing professional development. You don't just attend a week of conferences and then go back and try and implement. You're given specific things to try and work on, and then they actually come and check up on you to hold you accountable for those things that you've tried to implement within your classroom through site visits and regular professional development. So I would say that for us especially, it's been a major driving force, with the combination of having fantastic teachers, a major driving force for us to be able to really impact student growth. And I'm to a point where I do feel confident that that going forward we can carry on this work at my school. But I think that we could even solidify that with one more year of help. It's really nice to have someone else come out and give input from an outsider's perspective. For a couple of reasons. Sometimes they see things that we don't see, but additionally they may see things that we as administration see, but if someone else is saying it, we may say it 5 or 6 times, but someone else says it once, and for some reason it sticks, because they hear our voice a lot. So it's nice to have that input that way. Any questions? I'm not taking too much time.
Thank you very much.
How big is Lincoln Academy?
We have 900 students,
And
K through 9.
K-9?
Mhm.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you.
Is there another principal that wants to
Yes.
have a couple minutes?
Okay. I'd like to start the same. Our teachers are wonderful teachers, but with this A2A project, it brought us together and helped us kind of concentrate more on what needs to be best, which is diving into the data. The first year that we implemented A2A, our SAGE scores increased over 100 points. And when we look back at that, that's where our driving force was. Once our teachers saw that and bought in and could see that it's working, it was like, what do we do? And so we want to do next. We are almost there. Our last PL session, you know, we did do it ourselves at our school site, which was really great to have some support there as well. But moving forward, we're pretty close, but we just don't know everything that the project has to offer. So that was our big push. When I heard that here this morning, I asked if I could come up. It wasn't an invitation. I just said, can I please come up? Because that's how important it is to Southern Utah, down to Kane County. We are the only school in our district in the project, and now our superintendent's asking if we can help start sharing in our district. So having one more year would help push us over that edge to be able to go into all the other schools and start helping them. We're starting to go away from an A2A. It's more of, this is what we do. This is our district. So we got to give credit to the A2A project and those that created it, helped organize it for us. We just need that extra little bit that we need to learn the final steps for it. So that was my big push for it. And I do want to share, we first went in, my kindergarten teacher, we were singleton, so one teacher per grade level, and we started concentrating on writing for our first year, and she told us there's no way kindergartens can write sentences. And I have proof, we have paragraphs, capitals, punctuation. I mean, that kind of a concentration is where, yes, absolutely.
And restate for us your name and your school.
Tracy Stevens. And
Tracy
I'm-
from Kanab.
Yeah, it's in Orderville. It's Valley Elementary in Orderville, Utah.
Oh, you're in Orderville.
Yes.
Our car broke down in Orderville.
Sorry.
They took care of us. Yeah, Orderville.
Orderville.
Orderville. Yes.
On the east side of Zines Park there.
Yes. East side.
So maybe you could talk a little bit, I've heard, and I've heard this from you, I've heard this through Sydney, that your professional development has to be arranged a little differently because they have one teacher per grade if they can't send a team of teachers to a PD event. So I understand your superintendent arranges your teacher prep days and so on those days?
He will in the future. This last year, we actually went to the board and received special calendar items that we took 4 separate days, separate than the PD days that the district did. So it kind of put us out there a little bit as an island, doing our own thing. But this next year, we're going to, work with a couple of teachers. I know you have some creative things that are coming up to help us out, and we look forward to working that way at our side.
I have a question, which is maybe really simplistic. And I'm a teacher by training, so I should probably know this stuff better than I do. But do the specialists or the consultants come in and help your teachers learn, like be able to teach kindergartners to write? Do they give the teachers the skills? Is that how it works?
So we do PL sessions where we come to Salt Lake City and work with them, and they train us, showing us things that we've worked on, metacognition, feedback. So they're showing us how to do it, and then we go back to implement, and then they'll do a site visit saying, okay, what's going to happen? They watch us in our meetings, and then they'll visit the classrooms they have. So So yes,
And
it's a whole,
And watch how the teachers interact with the students, is that right?
they have, and they want to make sure that the EBIS, the strategies are implemented, and then they will give us feedback on that as well.
Okay,
And not just to the teachers, but to the administrators, so there's 2 different meetings they come for.
okay.
which is really
Thank you.
nice.
Tracy, thank you for your long, Patty wants.
Yes.
Tracy, will you let those kindergarten students know how impressed we are and their teachers as well?
Carnivores?
This,
I know.
this is amazing, so thanks for sharing their work as
Swim.
well.
I sure will. Spelling was helped on, but that was it. Everything else was taught.
Okay. Board Member Ellis.
Hi, thank you for coming up here. I know that that's a big drive, and we've had sketchy weather the last couple of days. So I have a question. When you say that I'm always hesitant to move towards a model that sounds like we're teaching to a test. And so I want to know how you are improving your SAGE scores 100%, because that actually concerns me just a little bit. Anyways.
So what we did is when we first looked at the program, we wanted to pull our spring data. And when we did, the concentration was in writing and then algebraic expressions, which were our lowest overall. And that's where we had to find a point. That's why we pulled our SAGE scores. In our lower grades, it's a DIBELS, and they had to try to relate the writing and the math that's related to that. So it was a little tricky in the lower grades. So SAGE is why we pulled that, and that's why I used that. That was our data point for starting to see where our success was. We had to measure somewhere, and that's why we chose that. We're not teaching to the test. That was just our point of reference so that we could see, is this working, so that we could get approval for our second year from our superintendent.
Thank you.
And I believe as a school, you get to decide what your measurements are. That's a choice you make.
Yes,
If I can just add to that a little bit. So in our school, even though we had mixed feelings about the program, a school does get to choose, which is really nice. And you're looking at SAGE just to see where your areas of weakness are. And so, we chose questioning and looked at depth of knowledge and things like that to kind of create a school-wide focus on getting kids to think deeper. So it's not that it's driven by the
Right,
test, but the test gives you feedback.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So what would you do for feedback if you didn't have SAGE?
Well, we could use the assessments we do on an individual level. This was just a uniform test that we could look at.
Oh, no.
And a lot of subjects don't have it, so you're looking at really the English, the math, the science to guide the whole school.
Good. Could I comment on that as well? Our K through 2 without the SAGE, they created a common assessment.
Oh,
So
yeah.
we did get a little bit of training on there, and the teachers did the math themselves, so they didn't have the SAGE to create.
Thank you. So I have another question. Well, I guess we can listen to mine's not pertinent to this,
Okay.
just in general. So I'll wait till we hear all the.
Okay, are there other principals that want to come forward?
The only one left. I'm Valerie Bergera, and I'm at Parkview Elementary in Salt Lake District. And Board Member Lear and Superintendent Dixon were able to visit my school in November. So I think they could speak to the things that they saw implemented in the classroom. I think we all can talk about increases in test scores. I appreciate what you brought up though, because for us, it's not just about increasing student proficiency on an assessment, but it's what happens in a classroom. What does everyday instruction look like? What does student self-confidence and self-esteem look like? How are they able to have conversations and to be able to express to others what they're learning and be able to ask informative questions when kids are thinking at different levels and depths of knowledge. So we see that in our school, as well as 4 years ago when I started at the school, we were a focus school. And if you look at our results over the last 4 years, we are now above the state average in 2 out of 3 content areas, which is pretty huge for us being a highly impacted Title I school of downtown Salt Lake. So I would say some of the things that I have seen this give to our school is depending on what supports are available in a district. Sometimes, districts are trying to work out different structures and find out how to support schools. This gives districts direction on how to move forward with schools. So you're impacting not only just schools in your district that are part of this assessment to achievement, but you're going to impact schools going forward because of systems that your district starts to put in place as a result of being involved in things like this. I would also say that one of the things that I have seen is that the opportunity for teachers to be involved in a team and to really be focused on certain things where they have a common vision, where they have common goals and direction of what they're working on, really moves the work forward and impacts not only classroom instruction, but also the culture that's there in your school, that you're working together collaboratively. Also, one of the things that I think we've benefited from a lot is the opportunity to network with other districts, charter schools that maybe you otherwise would never come in contact with, and be able to share ideas. I went to a conference in San Francisco 2 weeks ago and sat next to some girls from Jordan School District, and we started talking, and their school is involved in assessment to achievement, and so we started talking and sharing lots of ideas, and I gave them my card and told them they could come visit my school. But those network opportunities are big for us, because sometimes when you're in a district, you see things a certain way because this is how your district does things, and maybe you don't really think about doing things a different way till you start talking with other people. So it might be other schools in the project, it might be the consultants that you work with, but through that, like, you're gaining your capacity is increasing, and ideas to be able to bounce off with other people who may have fresh perspectives, different ideas that maybe you would have never thought of otherwise. So, I think that the work that's happening, I think it's very valuable, and I think it takes it to a new level for people to be able to be involved in something that is a statewide initiative, to say, this is not something that's just important in Salt Lake District, this is something that we as a state value in improving education for our students across the state of Utah, enough to invest in this. And that we should get to the point where good instruction in Salt Lake District should be good instruction in a charter school, should be good instruction in Orderville, and that's what it looks like, and we're all committed to working on these things and getting better together. So it's our 3rd year too, and my teachers would be really sad if it stopped, because I think the momentum is really positive. And you're welcome to come out, visit my school, ask Carol, ask Superintendent Dixon the things that they saw when they were there, because it's amazing.
It was, I know, I mean, this isn't supposed to be like a cheerleading opportunity, but it was really, I mean, and I don't spend a ton of time in 1st grade or lower elementary classrooms anymore, but the way that the teachers, the adults in the classroom interacted was so, I thought that was one of the most impressive things, that they just, it wasn't like one person was in charge, they just worked together so efficiently and so effectively.
Right.
That's just, I thought it was
Superintendent
amazing.
Dixon, would you?
Yeah, if I could take a point of privilege, I just want to echo what Board Member Lear said, that I truly believe that some of the best classroom instruction I've ever seen is at Parkview Elementary. And in large part, it's due to the constant focus on quality instruction by leadership. You're also in this committee going to hear about leadership standards today, and I think they're really woven together, the things that they learn in A to A, but it's school leadership. It really makes all the difference in monitoring quality instruction and using the data as part of that cycle. I talk about my visit to Parkview all of the time, about how, what I saw the teachers doing. It's not the students that bring the challenges are those of the adults in some of our most highly impacted schools, and ensuring that kids get the support they need from the adults and quality instruction. And just kudos to these great principals and the work that they're doing based on what they learn in A to A and other opportunities as well.
Thank you.
Just one of our rock star schools that I was so proud to be able to visit.
Jenny?
Can I ask, what was your area of focus with A to A? What did you guys focus on as a school?
We started with opportunities to respond, and then we moved to feedback, and then we have kept feedback going.
Nice.
I mean, we kept all of it going, but really slowly transitioned into feedback through metacognition.
Oh, nice.
But, I mean, one of the things that I would say that makes the biggest difference in how successful this is, like, I don't think it ever is about what is being delivered and expressed and people are being taught. I think it really depends on what the implementation looks like at a school, on what the results are in a school. And that's just really kind of the bottom line. But for us, the effectiveness is all about, this can't become something completely separate than the other things that you're working on in your school. So it has to all be connected, or otherwise, as a teacher, I'm sure you can say, and Carol, like, it won't make sense to people. They can't feel like they're working in like 15 different directions. So this has to be part of what your school improvement plan is. Has to be part of what you discuss and make a priority in faculty meeting. Has to be part of what any kind of professional development is that you're doing throughout the year, you know, with your school district and everything. It can't just be, oh, we're doing this with A2A, but here's what our school improvement plan focus and goals are. They all have to be linked and connected, and when that happens, I think that's when there's lots of power in what it is that you're working on, because people realize it really is something that really is important to you. And like, this is the focus of everything that happens in your school. When you do classroom observations, you're talking about this. You're talking about, are you seeing, you know, evidence of feedback or questioning or whatever in the classroom, and are you seeing that adults are continuing to learn, kids are continuing to learn? And so our focus with feedback is not just on how we as adults give students feedback in a classroom, but how does a student have the opportunity to give a teacher feedback on where they're at with their learning? And it's happening even in first grade and kindergarten. How do kids give each other feedback? You know, through rubrics and other conversations. How does a student self-assess where they're at in their own learning? So it's big, but it really is a part of everything that we do. It's a part of lesson planning and preparation. I mean, it's everything at our school. And so when that happens, I think it brings it all together, and that's why we've had such great success. And, you know, I went to a class years ago with David, and David, go look at my math scores. You'd be proud. I learned a lot. And our science guy, don't know you, but, you know, Parkview has some of the top science scores in the state, like in a Title I school. So, you know, it's not all about scores, and I hope that you understand that from what I've said today. It's really about walking into a classroom and like being wowed by the things that are happening, not only by what adults say, but part of it is being wowed by what kids say and how kids interact, and kids are engaged and kids are responding and learning. Because we can have awesome instruction in classrooms with adults, but if the kids are just sitting there and the kids aren't responding, we're not going to see the confidence. We're not going to see those skills building that we need kids to have to be successful in life, and not just, you know, demonstrating on a test. So it's big. Come out. Anybody. Right down the street.
Yes,
right now.
All right, well, I'm then looking for a motion on this to approve the use of federal or carryover funds?
It's federal. The carry forward, we didn't get that in time, so it would
Okay.
be readjusting. It would be money that's already in place.
All right.
In the assessment and accountability office. It would be the amount of $360,000, which we would use to support one more year these 60 schools that are participating and have responded positively with a request to continue participation in A2A.
Okay. Elise?
I'm trying to remember our last month's portion of this meeting. I'm just trying to figure out why this isn't appropriate in Finance Committee. Have you already talked to Scott Jones about?
No, I don't. I might have. Something
I'm just wondering, when we're making votes on financial decisions, I'm just curious about that.
Yeah, so when I came, one of my first tasks here as your employee was to bring our assessment accountability carry forward proposals to Finance Committee in December committee meeting. And at that time, we had some carry forward funding, and I had requested that carry forward money be allocated to allow us to continue with these schools. And as we met in preparation for that board meeting, because the board had taken an action in the fall of 2016 to reallocate the funding, which was previously the leasing money that was paying for this, to another purpose, the original contract for A2A, which is 5 years in length, basically became null and void. He asked me not to use my carry forward proposal. I was directed not to bring carry forward request for that because the board had made a decision not to do that. At that same board meeting, Superintendent Dixon presented her report, comments about the feedback she'd gotten on her statewide tour about A2A.
Right.
And so, in an awkward period there for a little while, and then we received direction to continue to try to find a way to move A2A forward. And that's how we ended up back here. I don't know if it should be in a different committee or not, but that's how we got here.
Yeah, just a little bit of history. So prior board leadership and prior board made a board determination that A2A was not a function of this board, that they were trying to move more into the operational and compliance and move away from some technical support. So there was a philosophical decision made by the board about A2A. And that's, I think, why it ended up back in standards and assessment, to see if you as a committee value it as part of the overall scope of the Board of Education and employees to be providing this kind of service. And again, at the time and to this day, it's really about building capacity in schools. So what is our role in leadership in building capacity? And that's, I think that's why the discussion is here. Financially, the role financially is to see, do we have carry forward balances? How can those be used? And you know, there is an allocation now with new legislation with $1 million. So it's really, this is a programmatic decision that I think the board has to make to reverse the prior board's decision.
I was just gonna make a motion. And I would like to move based on the philosophy that I think we should be providing technical assistance from this office and leadership from this office, and especially when it allows LEAs to choose.
Yes.
We're not forcing it on them, but they're finding what's most effective for them, even if they're midway through it. And so given that, I would like to move that we approve the use of this money in the way that Darren described, and move it on to the board for a final vote.
Okay, discussion to the motion, Lisa.
Sorry, my discussion really isn't to the motion, but I was trying to make a comment before the motion was made, if you'll entertain that.
I'll entertain it.
Thank you. So I didn't realize we were making like a philosophical decision here, because as we've had these discussions, it was more of a one-time, which I'm prepared to do, you know, let's let them finish out there. But then my understanding was that then local districts and local areas that wanted this program were going to come up with the means and mechanism to continue forward on their own. Are we now saying that we're going to take this program at the state level?
Well, you were given money legislatively.
Just $1 million though, so.
Ongoing.
I know, but that's.
So it will be to the state to continue the.
Right, but doesn't seem like very much when, even to move forward with this, it's that much, right? I mean, what is the implication long-term for that amount of funding? Are we then going to be going to the legislature asking them for more money to fund this adequately? Because, am I wrong in thinking that $1 million won't adequately fund this? Anyone know that?
Well, I think this is a program, as I understand it, where they go in and the idea is to build capacity within the school, not to do it for the school, but to build the school's capacity so that it's not something that you fund on and on and on and on forever, but you could fund new schools who want to come in.
Right, I still don't feel like when we're asking for what's the number?
360.
I'm just trying to figure out how $1 million really, that seems like a drop in the bucket.
Can I comment on
Yeah,
that? So to your point, the original contract the Utah State Board of Education had with Assessment to Achievement, or Ed Direction, to put the Assessment to Achievement program together, it was a 5-year contract, and year 1 was $631,000, year 2 was $1,095,000, and it was $1,010,000, and then it would have been $897,426. So you can kind of see it was designed for 2 cohorts of 45 schools each to start and run concurrently, and then finish out, and then they would be self-sustained within themselves. So your point of is $1 million enough is a good one. It's a good question, because the original contract would have been for 2 years would have been more than that. What we'd have to address when we start to figure out how to spend that $1 million is the RFP process. We'll just have to have some limitations on the number of schools that could participate. I think that's how it would be controlled to stay within that budget. We talked about this at the beginning of this meeting. As I visited with Zach and Faye in our purchasing office, they weren't. They didn't indicate, because we don't know what stipulations are tied to that money. I haven't seen that yet, whether it's for new schools or ongoing. We don't know for sure whether we could use that money to fund this $360,000 or not. But we do know there would have to be an RFP process, which means it would slow down. And if we don't move forward with this proposal that I'm bringing to you, which is, my intent is just a one-time out of this budget source, then these schools, especially our cohort 2 schools, most likely will have the rug pulled out earlier than they had been told that it would happen when they joined the program originally.
Okay, There's a motion before us. Is there any further discussion? Then all in favor, say aye.
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 I,
Any opposed? No. Okay. You came in with your eye a little late.
well, I wanted to, I had another comment to make, and if you'll let me say that.
Okay.
My eye is for this one-time vote. I don't know that I'm prepared to say philosophically that we need to make a shift in governance over the program. I'd like to reach out to the old board and ask them why they made that direction change. Anyways, that's my hesitation, is I feel like I want to know more of the history. I didn't understand that there had been a philosophical shift and that this is now a place where we're shifting back, and I would like to understand what they're thinking. So that's my hesitation.
Okay. So I see that we have been joined by Diana Cedric, and thanks to all you principals who came and spoke to us so
Yes, thank you.
eloquently. We appreciate it.
I'm gonna give you guys my card. You're welcome to come on over. You guys know where I am.
So I guess you already have.
Carol's been there. She knows where I'm at.
Thank you.
Patty, I'm sure you know how to find me.
Oh, yes.
David, you know where I'm at.
I know where you are.
Come on over. Come over.
Thank you again, all of you.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Okay. Diana, I think you are here to address issue 3.3, the implementation of provisions in R277-404. Is that? No.
I am
Which
here,
one are you
I am
on?
here to do,
Leadership standards.
no,
Here we go.
Oh.
no, we'll find it, it's,
3.7. No, never mind.
Yes.
it's the one, 3.5, Sherry.
Is that the
I
guidance
think
document?
the guidance document.
That for 700.
So I think
Oh,
that
there we go.
I think that the conversation maybe is changing a little bit from when I very first put in the memo.
They didn't have the rule on here. And I was looking.
Did you want to go to leadership standards next?
No.
And are you?
I've
doing
actually
another committee?
asked
Yes.
Chair Cannon if
Okay.
I could be allowed, because I need to go to a funeral.
She,
So, that's,
Sorry.
so I wanted to acknowledge her since she.
yes, so thank you, I really
So
appreciate that.
3.5.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
So what you have in board docs is FAQs for guidance for the middle school education requirements. This was requested by our curriculum directors in order to have clarity on implementation of the rule according to your wishes. I understand that this has led to a larger discussion about the role of FAQs and whether FAQs should be necessary. If the board rule is clear enough, some people say then there should be no need for FAQs. And so, but we have curriculum directors who are asking for FAQs. So I think a part of your discussion, and Patty can maybe help me with this, is where to go, not only with this one, but in the future.
Okay.
Do you want me?
Patty, do you want to?
So, part of the discussion, it's not exactly about the guidance document or the FAQs in any area whatsoever. It's about the process and the expectation from staff so that we can follow through and make sure that we're doing the wishes of the board and supporting our LEAs so that they know how to implement. And that's the difference is, right now, kind of the FAQs, in looking at some that have been created in the past, have gone outside their boundaries of interpreting the rule. And once they have a legal interpretation of the rule, that is something that we should not be putting out. So we move that to, is it a guidance document? And if it's a guidance document, then what should be in it? And so we were trying to think of, could there be a filter? And is the filter in guiding, does it then say a guidance document is something that guides back to the rule or guides to the LEA to say that this is a local decision? So it can only guide in two ways, back to the rule to say this is where you find it in making it happen for the question they don't understand, or should it be guiding them back to a local, that is a local decision? For example, the third part is just kind of like a Dear Colleague letter, because as a Dear Colleague letter, it's really saying, how do we implement this? For example, in the FAQs, there was a question on there about courses and credits. And in the new rule, it doesn't say now there's a difference between a Carnegie unit of credit and taking a course. And so within the rule itself, there's not really a way to go through that and, answer all those questions now, because in rule it doesn't state, we're no longer using the Carnegie credits or, units to do this. It's now about a course, and a course can be doesn't have to be a certain length of time or a certain number of seat hours. So that's not stated in the rule. Could it be? Yeah, you could have it in the rule, but then how long would that rule be, trying to anticipate all of those questions? So there's really a thing where our LEAs are asking for guidance and implementation. And if we have guidance, then we could do it with the 2 ways to guide, or it could be in the way of any type of guidance to then go back and try and make the rule more clear and open the rule back up to make the rule more clear. Or is it just a dear colleague letter of saying, if it's not stated exactly in the rule, then it's open for LEA interpretation, and you can get together as LEAs, and here's some LEAs who had completed documents. So we would just like some guidance on where to go, and it can be case by case, and we're fine with having it be case by case, but really giving us some parameters of what to call these documents as we move forward.
Okay. So, input. Go ahead, Carol.
I've had this conversation just kind of piece by piece with a bunch of different staff members, and I have mixed feelings about it, and maybe we're just gonna have to work our way through here, because I don't want to get to a point where we're sort of paralyzed because the staff wants to do the boards well, the board doesn't, board feels maybe it's an issue by issue discussion. And I also don't like the paralysis of the LEAs to say, oh, we're gonna be audited, which is one of my, my bigger beef is actually with the whole auditing process, and the fact that I don't wanna be in the fear business of you don't do anything because you might be audited and corrected and shamed, or, the worst, money withheld. So that's the kind of the bigger picture. And I guess what I come down to, and I was just trying to read this through to see how I felt about this particular one. I guess my biggest concern is that when a document like this is labeled guidance, then it is truly guidance. It's not, you will get in trouble if you don't do, or you are doing it wrong if you don't do, because teachers, educators are rule followers.
Yes.
They like to know the right answer and the wrong answer. They're not as comfortable as I wish they were in saying, just do the best, just take your best shot at it. And now then adding this new auditing, or this increased auditing effort, doesn't help them say, oh, we'll just do what we think is most logical and most productive for us. So I know that's kind of a non-comment in a way, but I personally, I guess I think I would go with some guidance documents. I don't object to that. But I would also like us to work toward helping LEAs use the rules. And they're not hard to read. And one of the things I think that they're a little, where I get a little frustrated is, I sometimes think they're a little, and this is not meant to be as pejorative as it sounds, but I think they're a little lazy. It's like, oh, that's just legalese. It's really not. So that's kind of like.
Yeah, I kind of agree with Carol. I really like the guidance, because what I've noticed with teachers and even with LEAs is that even if a rule's out, they'll say, we don't want to do anything until we have some guidance from the board. And they won't go, and I say, well, go back to the rule. And I'm really surprised at how many don't go back to the rule, either because they're scared or because they think they need it to be written in different language. So even with the credits, the rule says that you have to take a course. It says that, but it's almost like when you tell your students something and they need you to talk through it again. It's almost like this is it punctuates. It doesn't require a specific number of credits. It just fleshes it out. And I think districts and teachers, we like to see that, because it's like, okay, it's all right? Because we're rule followers. Are you sure? Are you sure? They just need guidance, but I don't want it to hinder and say, I want it to say, but go back to the rule. Go back to the rule. Those are the parameters. You can work within that, but here's some guidance to help you understand the rule if you need that reassurance. Because for whatever reason, a lot of times they won't trust themselves with the rule, even though they should.
Chair.
Yes.
And in the LEA's defense, our rules aren't always written clearly.
Right.
And so that is tricky for them to navigate, but I also am really torn on this as well, and I know we've had this discussion, but that's why I lean more towards it having to be a case-by-case basis, and I also am very hesitant when, as a board member, because of the legislative change that called us all the Utah State Board of Ed, it is confusing to people, because stuff will come out and they think that we've had this big board discussion, and so if something is put out by a department that has been interpreted, and then people are coming to us saying, why in the world did you do this? It doesn't follow statute, or it's violating my right here, my right there, and we don't know anything about it, then it just creates this, it makes everybody look bad, because the people that are elected to represent the people don't know what is going on, and the people, it just causes unneeded tension that isn't necessary. And so I don't know that I have an answer for you. That's the problem. Just in your direction.
Not yet. Oh, not yet. Well,
Go ahead.
one more thought, which Lisa raised some good points in that I think that part of the problem is there's been and this gets so big and philosophical, and I know you just tell us what to do on this one thing, so I'm sorry. But I think one of the problems is we have to work on some trust issues. Yeah. And because in years past there were, and people may argue, well, yeah, but there were a lot of things going on that shouldn't have been going on. Well, I would maybe risk that in the name of free agency and freedom, rather than have districts paralyzed, charters paralyzed, saying, we don't want to get in trouble. I am so tired of hearing that from adults. And I think that I think if this helps, at least for now, a couple of suggestions, just practical suggestions, Patty. And one, I think that if it's labeled guidance, you'll look through it and make sure it is guidance. And secondly, I think you refer them back to the rules whenever possible. Like I was looking through here, and it only mentioned R277-700 I think one time. And as provided in R2, and that kind of gets them used to maybe reading the rules.
And maybe even the line.
Yeah.
Maybe that's
Yes.
and
attaching the rules.
Right.
Yes,
So they get used to that.
Yeah, so they get used to that. And if when people talk to, when people, like staff people talk to LEA school district charters about this, they use the rule and say, it says right here, this is going to be the case. And then I think that the next piece, so those two things specifically, and then I absolutely agree with you in here that and it sounds like you are being sensitive to making sure that the guidance stays within the range of the rule and the statute, but I have to take issue a little bit with Elisa in that sometimes people, the whole world out there doesn't understand that a rule, that a law, that everything that law does, the state is precluded. That's not, I don't think that's accurate, and I think sometimes people believe it doesn't say you can do it, so that means you can't. And that's just not true. And I think that maybe a little education from the top about what rules are meant to describe, and then all of us work on those trust and interpretation issues.
In moving forward, this actually does give really.
Does that help a little?
It does give good direction.
That's just me
So
speaking.
No, I agree.
If we were to go back to the R277-705 middle school education requirements guidance document that's in board docs right now, would it then be appropriate that any time if we were to kind of make this as a soft process, or right now, I don't know how we would do that, but to try, which is when the question is how many credits are required in middle school, and then we have the answer and it says R277-700 does not require, then there's a link right there that actually links to that point in the document where a clarification is needed. So it kind of links you back to the rule when you just click on it, so that it's not, an R27700 line, whatever it is. There's just a link, so then you can go back to it and then you can look at the guidance in comparison to the language, and that can actually help with that transition in learning. And so that's something that we could do as staff quite easily to tie the two more closely together and make, a clear not translation, but implementation of here's where it's at. And then, in moving forward, I'm hearing that as, what was stated, as, make sure it's guidance, not interpretation. Should we call these guidance documents and not FAQs?
I
like guidance.
I like guidance as long as we really mean guidance.
Yeah.
And then,
And do we
refer
need a
back to the
statement
rule
Yeah.
and hyperlink and attach the rule with any form of guidance document.
Yeah.
And just wanted to make a comment. So there is in that document, can a student use multiple experiences in combination to meet the essential standards of the course? And the answer is yes, but outside courses, extracurricular activities or experiences must be completed within the school year that the course substitution is being requested. And we talked about that not being in.
I was just gonna, I noticed that.
Yeah,
That's
it's
not
not
in
in. And so I think the whole purpose behind the board taking action on this was to open up possibilities for students and to give them some more flexibility and let them flip out of something if they already have that type of expertise. So I want to make sure that we don't add barriers.
Right.
That we assure people that the purpose
Right.
is to give flexibility.
Yeah, and I was gonna say, if there are some things that the rule doesn't specify, I think it's okay to ask those questions on here, but just say, that is not specified in the rule and is, I don't know if you say that's open to your local decision making, so that they feel comfortable to say, oh, I can interpret that. The rule doesn't limit me, it doesn't set parameters, but here's what the rule does do and here's what it doesn't.
Yeah.
I think some districts would like that.
But I can just see myself as a parent sitting in a guidance office and being told this exact thing by a counselor when I'm asking if my student can flip out of something. So I don't know how we, I guess the point is to make the purpose of behind the rule clear that this is to give students flexibility.
And to teach them.
Yeah. And let's see.
Well, I
Diana,
just wanted to clarify that you would like that answer to be yes, period.
Which,
Or
Which
Oh,
one are you
the
referring
other
to?
one.
Can a student
It
use
should be-
multiple experiences in combination?
I'm sorry, which are,
They're not numbered.
They're not
It's
numbered.
the bottom. It's in the
I
document.
should do
Multiple
that
experience
too.
combination.
oh, yes.
Yeah, number
Yeah.
that, yeah.
So, yeah, the second one from the bottom that has the answer.
Well,
Yes.
I would say
It's
that.
just yes.
Yes.
and I'd say,
Because it's not specified
it
by the
depends on
rule.
what the rule says. Does it?
But
if
the rule doesn't.
The rule
If the
doesn't.
rule's quiet, then silent on it.
Do you want the answer to also say the rule is silent on this, or do you want it to just be yes and done?
Oh, see, I do like that.
I like it too.
I like it because it says you're not
Well, I
missing.
don't like it saying this is up for local interpretation because I've seen that abused too much. So that's where I'm hesitant, because if it goes against the spirit of the flexibility and then layer.
And I say,
I don't know.
I say baloney to the spirit. If we can't get it right in the rule, then it doesn't exist.
And I like-
And that's on us.
And they have the practice of saying, you go back to the rule, it's not specified in the rule, and so you get to interpret it.
Right.
I'm
And
just
I,
thinking of 404, and that's been a big debacle of how.
and I don't think it's been a debacle.
I don't think it's been a debacle.
I think the districts are having, and charters are just struggling with their
They're
own
scared.
autonomy. And I think that's something that we need to facilitate and not.
Struggling there.
Oh, I don't
So
feel- I don't
if
think-
we, because I've seen this already on the guidance document for the grade replacement and some of the interesting things that districts are doing with that. If we say it's subject to local interpretation, that opens the door for them to restrict it then to the answer that was previously here. If you don't say that, I think that's probably less likely to happen.
That's what I'm saying.
If you just say yes.
If you just say yes, I think they are less likely to make local barriers.
That's
But
what
if you
I-
say,
that's what I'm
yes,
saying.
you can have local policies, they're more likely to put up those barriers. And I've seen that already with the grade replacement rule.
Right, that's what I'm referring to.
Do you think that's a generalization though that is, I mean, is that always true, or does it just happen to be true on this issue, or?
Well, I don't know if it's true on this issue because we haven't had this out yet,
Yeah.
but I do know that it's happened, but it's happened in a couple places. So is it general? No, but it can't, it opens the door is all I'm saying.
Dana, do you think it'd be a problem if you just said, yes, but this is not specified in the rule? Do you think that would then
I think that would be
A problem.
less a problem
Because
than
that's what I would like,
talking
because then
about
it
local
teaches them,
policy.
go back.
Yeah, I see.
Go back to the
And
go
I
back
think
to
it's
the rule.
important to say that it's not prohibited in the rule or specified in
I
the rule,
like,
rather than just.
I like them to track
Actually,
themselves.
okay, so I'm gonna just reverse myself,
Okay.
because the question is, can a student use multiple experiences in combination to meet the essential standards? The question doesn't ask anything about time.
Right.
That time piece was added, so I think the answer,
That's
yes,
interpreting.
is sufficient.
Yes.
I do on that one. But
Yeah.
if there was a question,
But
does
there
it have to be
could be,
completed within the school
right.
year? That is not specified in the rule.
But I think that if we say that, I mean, and I may be one of 15 board members saying this, but I think that if the district says, the LEA says, we need some time management controls or issues, and so our policy is it has to be completed within a year, I'm completely comfortable with that.
Right, we can do that, but we don't need to encourage them to put barriers on it by saying.
I don't think it's a barrier. I think it is an efficiency, time management, so that they're not chasing credits that were earned 5 years ago and then trying to make something. I don't see that as a barrier at all. I see it as a reasonable management tool for an LEA. So I want to do what facilitates LEA's best product for all students, not just for one student.
May I make a suggestion?
Yes.
So having heard this, I agree with Patty. Listening to this discussion is really helpful in knowing what you want. So my suggestion would be that I take this back, redo it through this lens. Some may change, some may not, but I have a new lens now to use to look at it, and then bring it back next month for your approval. Would that
And
work?
we're only five,
Right.
we're only
15.
5 of 15, so there could be some other points of view too. And I don't want to give you the sense that this is
Then we
dispositive.
can take it.
Well, I'm hearing that this is not ready for your approval, I guess is what I'm
I think
saying.
it's really close.
It is.
I
I
would
like
be
it.
fine with it, let me just say that personally. But I think there's maybe some slight wording changes that might refine it.
Yeah, so clarifying question. When we come back next time in full board, whatever decision is made now, then the full board will discuss. At that point in time, Diana wouldn't have her stuff brought back till the following day. Would it be helpful, and this is how this is kind of awkward.
Now, I'm trying to figure out what you're saying.
Okay.
Get to the end of the row and I'll
So,
figure out that.
So we're, if Diana were to go back and change this document with a new lens in mind of it being a guidance document, guiding back to the rule, having hyperlinks, would it be helpful for the board to have that when they have the discussion on the next full board meeting?
Yes.
Okay,
I
because
think
here's the
Then
problem.
that delays it 2 months. is what you're saying.
Well, it would delay it 2 months if we brought it back to standards, and then we brought it
Yeah, to the board the next.
the next month, so would it, so how,
I
yeah.
see what you're
Yeah,
saying.
and
So
so
have her redo it
Yes.
and just bring it back to report out to
Just
the
so we get
board.
other input.
As an example of here's where it started, to actually show the 2 examples, here's where it started, and with guidance from the committee, this is what it would look like to add to the full board discussion next month.
And
Would that be
and
helpful?
it's not
I
a
like
reading
that.
calendar or anything,
And
so.
Right.
It's just part of
And
the
one more
report.
in response to that, and I'm sorry, Lisa, I know you've been really patient, but in response to that, we're only 5 of 15 board members, not at all a quorum. So I don't think, if you wanted, just as we're kind of exploring how to do this, if you wanted to send it out to us to say,
Okay, yeah.
is this kind of what you were looking for?
Okay, that can help add to the conversation for the full board,
Yes,
would that be
I think
appropriate?
so.
But it would not be able to be passed till until the following.
Right, but it would add to the conversation.
And then it would guide us.
Elisa.
So, a couple things. First of all, I want to defend audit because I feel like we need to get away from the fear of audit and recognize its capacity for recognizing improvement and our responsibility to be accountable to the taxpayers and the citizens that are funding education. And so I just wanted to put in that little plug as the audit chair. But I also wanted to request that if you want a philosophical discussion about this, it would be helpful to me to look at more than one rule. So that I can see where guidance documents are on a myriad of different discussions, so that I can look at it instead of just looking at it from the lens of one to see where so I can really focus my,
So you would like to have more than one comparison?
Well,
right.
yeah, and I
Okay.
think that's a good point. And
Okay.
and
If
interestingly,
we're making a decision for other things, not just this one.
although, and I don't know if it's gonna be a completely consistent philosophical
Right, because it's like you said, case by
discussion either,
case.
because
Right.
having just spent, I don't know, an hour yesterday talking about school fees, there are probably more absolutes than there are in things like this. And maybe I'm guessing what Leo wanted to say, but special ed has that same
Right.
challenge. Is
And
there
we
some,
have case law
yeah,
Yeah.
that doesn't apply to this situation. So our guidance documents, we have rules,
Right.
your rules,
yeah.
and then we have federal regs, and we have case law in between them. So our guidance documents often reference case law.
Mhm.
So they're very different.
Right.
But we have a ton of them.
And frankly, actually, some of these issues, not this one in particular, but some of these issues also have case law. It's not necessarily controlling, it's, yours is more, you have Supreme Court case law, but, so there are some rules that govern some of these issues that are not statute, that are not our rule.
Yes.
And just when I've talked a lot, I'm sorry, but it's something this has been kind of going on in my subconscious for like months. And so one more thought, and this is just 5 of us, but I think that this sends a message to the board that we need to be more careful about our rules. We need to be,
We do.
we can't just, yeah, that's fine, that's written. We need to really be careful writers and listeners, and if it doesn't say it in the rule, I'm not a big person for intent. I want it to say it in the rule or not.
No, I
And,
agree.
and I don't want to guess, and I don't believe that if someone sponsors a bill or sponsors a rule or promotes a rule, that intent controls.
Yeah.
It's the body that finally adopts the rule.
That's true. So,
Yes.
Patty whispered to me, like maybe it would be helpful to do a working group, but I'm wondering if you guys could help me discuss if this would be a subgroup to this committee, or if we'd like to make a board task force so you have different opinions.
For doing what?
So staff is asking us to help them know whether or not they want if we want FAQs or guidance documents and how to proceed forward when we have the things coming from special ed, where there's a lot of different things that go into play. And what we can do as board members to create rules that aren't confusing, because often we do. And so then often our staff feels like they must interpret because nobody knows where to go or what to do. And so maybe it is something that needs to be more thoroughly discussed than right here and handing us a couple things to look at.
Yeah. Well, personally, I don't see how to do this effectively other than on a case-by-case, rule-by-rule scenario. Because they're also different and their scope is different. So I think that, and I think what you're saying is look at everything.
Well, I think that it's going to have to be a combination, that I don't think there's any way to get around a case-by-case basis because it's complex, but I do believe we could come up with some guidelines of general rules for our staff to guide them, and how to determine whether or not something is going to need a more thorough look from the board versus a department head being able to send something out. I think that if we had a thorough discussion and deep look at this, we could come up with some guiding rules to not leave staff in such a precarious situation where they have to wonder, is this the thing that I'm gonna send out that's gonna cause a lot of backlash? Or maybe it's this one, I can see how it'd be very confusing to not know when they're going to get, maybe.
And so do you see that happening in a one-time work group, or do you see that being like in your barriers task force?
It could be a barriers task force. That's a good idea. And we don't have to create a new thing.
I kind of don't want to overbake this though.
Right.
I feel like we're overbaking it.
Let's see what happens.
Yeah, let's just,
Well, this is just one rule, big ass.
Right,
but it's a
I know, but I think that's the.
Diana?
Well, something that occurs to me is that not every rule ends up having questions come out.
Right.
And so, and I think it's a great idea to talk about this more in the Barriers Task Force, to think about, well, where in the process does the field get a chance? Because these aren't my questions, these are the
Right,
questions
right.
that people were asking
Right.
me, so I was trying to provide the clarification. So thinking about that process and having there be a chance for that public input before the rule is finalized.
Well,
Yes.
so one thing that we've been discussing, I don't know where, off book probably, I mean, offline, just kind of in philosophical discussions, is that it's my personal belief that we have got to do a better job with communication, not only to the public, but to the LEAs. And one of it is a lot of LEAs, and this kind of came up with a discussion I had with someone on 404, is when it's passed at the board, they think that that means it's done. When it still has this process where people can request a hearing, and that is a time where LEAs can really look at a rule that the board has passed and said, this is the time that I can look at this and determine whether or not these questions are answered by the rule. And then we get that feedback, and that gives us time to do that. But we need to make sure that we are communicating that when the vote is taken that we passed a rule, it is not done because it's subject to these other parameters by statute and valid, so that people can give feedback and have that time. So I think that is a discussion that we could do a better job at making sure that people understand that process, not just LEAs, but the public in general, associations, everybody. Anyways, and that might help if we do that.
Okay, so I think we have given some guidance to Patty, and she's recorded that. I think we have looked at maybe taking some next steps, which would be having Diana go back and recreate the document, and then sending that document out to the full board along with the previous document, so changes are evident. And then this would be brought back as a committee item to the full board.
I think I also heard that you wanted this to come to this committee for
Yes. Not
input.
full board first, but
That's
this
what-
committee first.
That's
Okay,
what I thought I
to
heard.
this committee
Because they
first.
wouldn't know what the discussion was when they received it.
And I don't know that and this is just my opinion, so you decide, but as the chair, but I don't know that the full board needs to see both of these like a rule necessarily. I think that my suggestion was just that if as we begin this process of trying to strike a good medium for what is guidance, and that it could be circulated to this committee to say, yeah, I think that's what, at least I have in mind.
Okay, so my question then is, next month, where will we see this item? Will it be coming back to our committee? Will it be on the committee report to the full board? And if so, in what form? So.
I envisioned it, based on what you were saying, is that I think it would be okay in the committee report to say, here's what we're talking about, we're bringing it back to committee, here are some things to think about, do you have any input as we go into our standards and assessment meeting?
Okay.
Just because, like Carol says, we're 5, and, it would be nice to get a sense of what their lens is as we go in.
Okay, well, so then this would come out as, would this be action? Would it be reported just as an information item?
Discussion, and then here it would become action.
Okay.
But I don't want every guidance document to have to.
No, just this first time, get a sense.
Is that what you're thinking?
I think just a sense to see if
And
we're on the
then,
right.
to follow up on the entire issue, we would refer it to the Eliminating Barriers Task Force for some general guidance and more discussion.
And that would come back to the board for that, whatever that committee recommends would then come back to the board for final.
For action.
Yes.
So do we feel clear? Are we happy with that?
I think so.
I
You got it?
Yeah, this is great. It's really, really good. Yeah.
Okay,
Thanks, you guys.
Diana, we finished up 17 minutes before you had to leave.
Oh.
Appreciate that. Let me just go back and do a little social housekeeping here. I would like to introduce to you Allison Nicholson. Allison, she was busy in another committee this morning. They've got her doing dual duties already, but she is going to be replacing Tiffany Stanley as staff to and policy advisor to our committee. So through June 30th. Okay, interim policy advisor. So I think she has 2 children, right? And lives in Sugar House. Do you want to say anything else, Stan?
Stand and introduce yourself.
Yes. Yeah. So I used to work with Angie at the legislature. She and I were teammates and drafted education bills and staff education committees. I was there, we started on the same day. I was there 8.5 years and she was there 10. And so now I'm at the University of Utah at the Utah Education Policy Center. And I've been helping out contracting with Angie or Scott. So happy to be here.
Allison, we welcome you. Thank you.
Well, and I have to say her greatest claim to fame is she's a good friend of my oldest son.
Okay, so I believe that brings us back to the educational leadership standards, and David Smith has been patiently awaiting for us to get to his item on the agenda. Welcome, David.
Thank you. So I'm here to do 2 things, hopefully. In the board docs, there's a document that is a report of our 90-day public review.
Public review, okay.
Report?
Public review report?
Public review.
Public review report. And so this is just what happened with our public review. We released that on November 6th, which was the Monday after board meeting in November. It closed on Sunday, February 4th, and we have some statistics to report. We had 343 responses. You can see the different demographics there. One demographic that I feel pretty good about is the fact that 40% of our respondents were parents. And of course, we had a lot of response from school administrators, not much from teachers. We did send out numerous notices and reminders to district people and to principals, and it was also advertised on the through Mark Peterson's normal public relations channels as well. So we asked certain questions, and one of the questions that we asked was, do you think out of these 7 standards, we have 7 strands actually, and do you think that these strands, that these standards really represent the appropriate responsibilities and high expectations for school leaders? Because the standards that we're looking at are geared towards school leaders specifically. So we're talking about assistants, principals, assistant principals, TSAs, that kind of thing. And so our averages for those 7 strands were 92% said yes, that they are, 6% said no, 3% said they weren't sure. I have the averages for all of the strands if you're interested in seeing those. I also have all of the comments that are in an appendix as well, that I certainly be willing to pass on to you. Just that was a lot of paper, a lot of space. We have
strands. Sorry, David, to interrupt you, but are the strands somewhere in, or one of these documents that we have? Show that, which number is it?
I probably should have just said, here's the other document. So should we do that?
Oh, wait.
So there are 2 other documents. One of them is the proposed UL's revision with public standard changes. So let me just kind of lead you through that. This is the document that I brought to the board in November that was approved, but it has changes that were made through the public review process in the way that we normally show changes, with strikeouts and underlines and that kind of thing. And so that's what that document is all about. Yes?
Good question. So, did you make changes based upon one person suggesting it? What were the parameters to decide that this was worthy of a change?
So we looked at, what I did was I looked at them very carefully, and if there were a number of comments that said this is something that needs to happen, that had more weight. But there were some where there were just a few, but they made such a good point that it just made sense to make the changes. For example, one of the changes that was recommended was in Standard 1.1. If you just want to look at that really fast, one of the comments that I got, and this was just a couple of people, but they said you haven't specifically called out parents in Standard 1.1. So Standard 1.1 said collaborate with faculty, staff, and the school community to develop, and they said you need to specifically call out parents, and so I did. So I added that as part of that standard because it just made so much sense. Okay, so that was the process. We looked at them very carefully, said, does this make sense? Even if there weren't a lot of people who said it, or if there were certainly a lot of people who said it, then we took a really even stronger look at it. So that is another document that's there, and then the other document that is there is the fully formatted version of the leadership standards, where you can see, I mean, this is one of Lee Gray's creations, and you can see the strands and the standards for each one. Yeah, that's the one with the green apples on it.
It is. I love those.
Okay, so that's what we have there. So the public review, it was by far very positive. There were some good suggestions. We ended up making 11 changes in the standards. Some of them were just a word or two, but one was an entirely new standard that was suggested by the superintendency, by the leadership council here in our office. That would be standard 7.3, that talks about leading faculty and staff to equitably distribute and target resources at the right moment and in the right places to achieve student success. Okay, so that was one that was added in. Others are just wording changes or clarifications or making certain that the right stakeholders were included in the process. So anyway, that's what we have there. So what I would like to do is, since the changes were so minimal, I'd like to ask if you would be willing to accept the report of the 90-day review, but then also approve the standards and move them forward to the whole board.
So that is the action that we have looked at. David, tell us about implementation of these standards and the timeline for that.
Sure. So the way we implement any kind of standards is that we take a year for professional development and to create surrounding documents. So for example, our school districts, we weren't planning on doing this, but our school districts have asked that we create a model evaluation system for principals. We have one right now, but it's based on the old standards and it's not easy to work with, and districts have had some real struggles with it. In my conversations with superintendents, they said we really need to fix this. So they've asked us to do a model evaluation system. We are going to be planning professional learning for principals and principal supervisors during the course of the next year. These standards will be part of that. They'll be based on that. And so we'll take the next year to do that and then fully implement the standards in the 1920 school year, 2019-20.
How do you do that training?
We have a number of different plans. We have a 5-part series. of learning labs, which will be either online or in person. We have seminars that we'll be conducting, regional seminars around the state. We did regional principal seminars last summer, and they were very, very successful. And we had some really great evaluations from those. We'll be doing some things that are job embedded. We're going to be talking with districts about coaches for principals and mentors for principals, and then also some in-school helps. So both some principal networks as well, some things online where principals can ask questions of each other, that kind of thing. So we have a full spectrum of things that we're going to be looking at.
Just interested in how that would do, how you do that.
Right. One of the things that really helps us is that in Title IIA of ESSA, there's a provision that you can set aside 3% of the Title IIA money for developing leaders, and it's specifically related to school leaders. So that gives us some funding that we really need in order to do the kind of things that I was just talking about.
Great. Okay, are there any questions for David from committee members? Okay.
No, I would just like to see the public. I'm always interested in that.
Awesome, I will email that to you.
Thank you.
Would the other
Yeah.
members like to see that
sure.
as well?
Yeah, do it,
Sure,
please.
you bet. I guess I should have just included it, but I'll email it to all of you.
Thank you.
Okay.
And should I move that,
Should I just
then
email
that
it
we
out to you?
accept this and?
Okay, that we receive the report and then approve the standards.
And approve the standards and do the, go to the board then
Yeah.
for further discussion,
And then that will be moved on to the.
and to the board for further discussion.
Right.
All right, then all in favor say aye.
Aye.
It's unanimous, David.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'll send those things to Sherry, and Sherry will send them out.
Thank you.
Great. All right, thank you.
All right. That moves us to item 3.3, the implementation of provisions in 404. So it looks like we have 404 before us, and this could be an action item, but only for the 2018-19 school year, because this year people are already doing their assessments and so forth. And then this also is an item for discussion. 404 was approved by the state board in January and is published in the February 1 Utah State Bulletin, subject to a 30-day comment period, and it became effective on March the 12th. So what we're looking at here is we have two parent options. We have an option for parents to opt in and receive a grade for their children's participation. We have an option for parents to opt out with no grade or consequences to the student. And with that introduction, Darren, we'll turn to you.
I'm not sure where to start. I'm sitting back there smiling as you were talking about the guiding documents, and especially Board Member Ellis wanting to have a larger sample size. This document, after the board took action in January, I started receiving questions from the field right away. And so I started working on a document that's labeled the guiding document. And it took a while to write it because it was difficult to write it without trying to infer what the rule means, right? And put in that guiding document links to different rules, and also statute that could be perceived as conflicting. And then I put that on this committee to talk about that, and then that I think has brought us to this point where we pulled that off and brought a broader discussion about the rule itself. It also might be one of those where we could talk about maybe the rule itself needs some clarity. In the rule itself, we have, this is what causes the field a challenge here, is we have the statement that says a student's academic grade or portion of the student's academic grade, that an educator can't use the score from a statewide assessment, and then just a few places down, we introduce what's already a right that parents have, right, but it's not explicitly stated, that allows them to ask for reasonable accommodations for demonstrated proficiency. And we've stated that they then could request to have data from a state-required assessment to fulfill a requirement in the course.
What line are you on there?
I'm on C, so it's R277404-6.
I got there, in blue.
Yeah, so that, and then the one that the field looks at and says, wait a minute, what should we do here, is A up there, actually the initial I there, under 1A. And so that has caused questions to come from the field, and so there is some need there, and we'll talk more about the other attachment that you've got, or what Tiffany Stanley's suggestion is 3 or 4 different options long-term. In the short term, because the assessment window for spring testing starts on Tuesday, it's opened up, and so schools are, to your point as well, Board Member Ellis, saw that, started to take action or react. Some didn't. Some districts have a more conservative disposition of just held tight. I think Weber's one of those. Other districts, where my kids go, they've taken action.
They've been sending out letters.
And part of that is them not understanding how to implement. So the guiding documents, coming from the field, the guiding documents are really important to help us know how to implement rule changes or rules themselves or statute. In the short term, Dave Thomas has a suggestion to handle for this. I don't know if you want to talk about that first. It depends on what you'd like. He has a.
Why don't we go ahead and hear from Dave?
Okay, I was asked to take a look at the statutes and also the rules to determine whether or not that this is consistent with the law. And it really, I think that the way that we finally came up with it is the thing that drives this is reasonable accommodation. And it is the parents that are driving this, not and there are 2 prohibitions as has already been indicated in statute, where the schools can't do it. And if you take a look at the one that is probably the most, where it talks about that the school can't create an incentive or reward the student for it. If you look at the statute prohibits specifically the LEA. It doesn't talk about the parents. And so that's where the difference is that the LEA can't lead out, but the parents certainly can. And the idea that an accommodation is now a reward doesn't make any sense, because if you're asking, as the parents that are directing the academics of their student coming in and asking for that accommodation because their student tests well, and they know that they'll be able to do that, to be able to use that test to fulfill a requirement is certainly appropriate for the parents to ask for that accommodation. It would seem unreasonable to deny it strictly because you're saying, well, the school can't push it, and therefore you can't ask for it. That would be I think that would be an unreasonable approach to that simple request. But if the parents request it, and move forward with it on that basis. So it does become kind of an interesting dance to say, well, how do you let parents know that they can ask for such an accommodation, and yet you can't go out and you can't push that as far as the school is concerned? It does create a little bit of a chicken and an egg problem, but to the extent that parents need to know that there is a reasonable accommodation for, and they can make that request, as long as it comes as they're the moving force for it, and not the LEA. And that's where the prohibition, both the prohibitions, statutory prohibitions, or prohibitions against the school being the one who creates either the reward or the incentive. And they can't use it for those particular purposes. But the parents certainly can. And I think that to restrict it because you're saying, well, school can't do it, therefore you can't do it as a parent, that would, I think, would fly in the face of the very basic proposition, which is reasonable accommodation.
Elisa.
So this is my problem, and because we had this discussion, and because I am a big advocate of parents being able to guide and direct their educational path, I'm still trying to wrap my head around how I missed this discussion. Either that, or it's being interpreted completely different than I thought. And so, because what I'm hearing from parents is that districts are now telling them SAGE
can be used as your grade in a threatening manner.
No.
Like to, that, no,
No,
that's
I
what's
know.
happening.
Yeah.
That's what,
Yeah, at
that's
least
what
from your
parents.
parents sometimes. Right.
That's what I'm hearing,
Yeah.
because people know where I stand, so people across the state contact me because they know that I will stand up for them.
That's not.
And so it doesn't mean that my parents are different or better than someone else's parents, but they know that I will stand up for their rights.
But, and so.
I'm not saying all parents think like that.
Right, but can you
So-
give us an idea of how many comments you may have heard from parents? So-
Just all across the state, different
But like
districts.
800
And are they going back to 30?
No, no, I don't, people, I'm talking about 10 people probably.
Yeah,
Oh.
I've had kind of the same
Yeah,
experience.
it's not like.
It's not a lot, but there are.
And just to
Right.
add to the conversation,
But how many
I've
people
heard
are-
the
But
opposite.
can I
Sure.
finish? Sorry, I haven't gotten to finish. Anyway, and so and nowhere in here does it say it can be used as a grade, it says to fulfill a course requirement. And so I would think that that could mean I may get credit for something, and when are the SAGE scores even given to you? How far after the test? Because the first year it was October.
Well, if it's,
The next
if it's
school year.
for example, in English language arts, if it's the reading, we get those right away. The writing portion, we have to wait a
You
couple
wait.
weeks.
Just a couple weeks.
But we
So
get
it's
it
no
before
longer the next school year.
Yes, it used to be, but then now we get them within a week, at least.
Anyways, because based on what I'm hearing, I'm apt to say we need to strike this whole portion because it's being used as a punishment mechanism, at least in verbiage, to certain parents that are of the mindset that they would like their child to opt out of the test. If it was truly being used as a mechanism where parents could request the accommodation, but I still have a problem because I hear of so many times where it's being used like as a mechanism to put kids in, SAGE performance into advanced classes, and people have this fear that if they opt out, their child is not going to be able to advance in higher level courses. And I feel like we need to alleviate that and recognize a parent's fundamental role. And in either instance,
Yeah, your rule is really clear about placement in advance. Later in this rule, it's
right,
really
we
clear,
talked
it's
about it,
prohibitive.
but, right, we talked about it because.
Okay,
I
I'm
remember
going
that,
to acknowledge
yeah.
Carol and then Jenny.
And
Then
what I'm
Dave.
hearing from parents in various places, primarily in my district, but not solely, is that their children are being bullied or encouraged to not take SAGE. They're in a very negative way. And I think that is equally troubling. And I think that speaks to the concern that there's a wide spectrum of what children are experiencing and parents are experiencing. And so personally,
Who's bullying them? Sorry, that's just mine.
other students for the most part. Other students are like talking them out of, well, don't take that stupid test. Our parents think that's dumb, we're not taking it. And so they're being discouraged from taking the test. And when I've explained this change in the rule gives an opportunity for the test to be meaningful and helpful and purposeful, then the parents, they haven't talked directly to their children yet, they're teenagers, but their parents have said, what a great idea, because I want my kids to go to school that day. I want them to take that test. I think it is helpful information for me and for teachers. And so to me, this neutralizes the situation to the best we can with an imperfect situation.
Jenny.
So I just wanted to ask, Elisa, where are your parents that are struggling with this, where are they getting that information? Are they reading the rule?
No, it's from
Are
the
they-
administrators.
An
Before
administrator
it
is
was
sending
even
out,
implemented.
they're saying the word grade?
Or teachers, yes. So now you have to recognize as a teacher that students will hear something you say and they may
Yes.
interpret it completely different.
But I
And
guess,
so sometimes it could be, they go home and say, my teacher said this, and so then parents are like,
Right.
where is this coming from?
but like, do you have a
But it's
document
all
that came
over-
from the district?
I don't, I could
I
reach
just
out
didn't
and
know, 'cause
ask.
that
I could
concerns
reach
me
out and
too.
ask, but it's just interesting to me how all across the state, I'm seeing similar things. And
Which
because
goes back to why we need a
there's
guiding document.
There's a
But
great
I still-
network among districts, and so
No, I see.
if one district does
Yeah.
something, they say, hey, this is a good idea.
And I just want to finish and say, so I have talked to students about this, and There is, in junior high especially, there is, it's not a philosophical thing like I don't want to take the test. It's there is a bullying like, why would you take this test when you don't have to? We can get out of a test, and it becomes like a tumbleweed. And when I have talked to my students about, I kind of explained some of the things, they are excited and they're like, well, that makes sense. Why not let this count for me so I take one test instead of two? But then they're like, well, what if I do poorly? And I try to explain to them, it won't hurt your grade. You will have another opportunity to demonstrate competency. Parents like it, the parents I've talked to, students like it, but I think we need, like I love that thing that Darren sent out that said, here's a guiding document that you can use. Nowhere does it say grade. It says to replace another test or another competency, so that's where I think we need help, so parents aren't getting the idea that this is punitive. Not at all. That is not the intent to be punitive at all. Let's give the parents who have a choice to opt in, let's give them that choice.
Well, I like that, you're saying exactly the things that I was looking for, and sitting down and trying to put together a legal analysis. But one of the things that I thought is that, okay, if you struck the language out of the rule, you took it out altogether, and you have a savvy parent who walks in and says, okay, I want a reasonable accommodation, I want it to count. Could the school turn them down?
No.
No. And so in essence, what we're doing is we're really stating what the reality is. And while there may be those that want to try to twist it and turn it, or, for whatever other purposes, I think you look at the rest of the statute, and the rest of the statute says, look at LEA, you can't do this, but the parent can. The parent can direct it, and the parent can move forward. So I think that if there's anything in a guidance document to say, look at LEAs, you cannot be the moving force for either pushing, promoting, or anything else these particular tests. But if a parent decides that this is how they want to direct their student with regard to their education, that's permitted. In fact, that is exactly what the law is standing for.
Okay, I'm going to Carol.
And I wanted to add, one of the things I like about this language is it's exactly what you were saying earlier, Lisa. It communicates with parents. It says, it doesn't leave them guessing, well, can I come up with an idea, or what's my plan? This is a method in the rule of communicating with parents to say, you have an option to make this, to get your, to have your student in school, to take this test, to have it be a meaningful experience and useful. And I like that idea that it makes it true parent choice, because it gives both, give both pieces of information in one place. Yeah.
Elisa.
Okay, so I'm not accusing because I'm not in your classroom, but I just want to ask you to think from a different perspective.
Yeah.
So Carol is recognizing that some students are feeling bullied into opting out of the test, which is, I can see happening, but also it's a very small percentage of students that are opting out, really. But as a teacher, are you having this discussion in the classroom? Can you see that you may inadvertently be making kids feel bullied into taking the test?
I see what you're saying, and I was really careful when we had this discussion. It was a kid who said, he walked into my classroom and said, I'm opting out, and everyone's like, I want to opt out too. And I said, I want you to just consider something. And sometimes I will talk to him about things that go on in the state board, because I like them to hear those things that I can. And I just asked them the question. I said, that is your right to opt out, and I'm not going to sway you one way or another, but if the test could replace a final exam, would you still opt out? And the kids were like, heck no. I would like to have that opportunity to show my competency.
I don't like this at all anymore. Sorry, I mean, I appreciate how you handled that,
but can I ask what the issue?
Well, if the student
there was
that's
no
opting
bullying
out now feels like, because some teachers, like my son, was opting out of SAGE in chemistry. And the chemistry teacher was sending home a letter and telling the class, if you opt out, you will be given a more difficult test.
No,
and so now,
I would never say that.
I know you wouldn't say that, but if there becomes this idea that students that take SAGE can not take a final exam, and then there becomes,
and I guess just to respond to
where that can become a more
my intention was to
test,
say,
a lot of students think this is a joke and an easy test.
Right, but the intention was to say, guess what, instead of one way to demonstrate your competency, you have another option. You don't just have this option, you can show competency this way, you can show competency this way, and we're gonna give you as much chances as you want, because we want you to learn, and we want you to show us how you demonstrate competency. It is not punitive, and the kid that said he was gonna opt out, his parents, he was just a kid that was kind of just like a regular teenager, like, I don't wanna take a test. It wasn't a bullying situation at all, and I think most teachers are sensitive to that, because we don't want kids to feel uncomfortable or unsafe with whatever their decisions are.
So I have a question for Dave. So, we have in Utah a very vocal group who have really made an issue of this ability to opt out. So now we have the other side of the equations saying that parents, if you want this opportunity to opt in, you can have that opportunity, but the LEA can't tell you about it. So I'm wondering, you know, how fair is that to parents? So we have some parents that are organized and have, you know, a strong voice, and then we have the silent majority of parents. So how do we level the playing field?
Well, no, that's always a problem, particularly when you're talking about not a playing field, but a pendulum, as you swing. But one of the things that I thought was interesting is that the very group that is pushing the opt-out we're essentially using exactly the same right. You have the right to opt out, but you also have the right to opt in. I mean, it's your choice.
Yeah.
But to have it mean only one thing,
Right.
you can only opt out. You can't do anything else. That's not what, and that's really my simple analysis. That's not what the statute says. The statute says that the LEA can't be the one who's making the decision. It has nothing to do. In fact, actually, it's quite opposite, that the parents can direct how it's used. And so if the parents decide, yeah, hey, this is a good idea, we like the idea of having additional options, I want my child to be able to demonstrate competency, if they can do it this way versus that way, why not? And so it's the very group that is saying, hey, we get to choose, we can opt out, so we can exercise that right. You're using the same right to opt in.
Right.
And so the playing field is actually level. It's just that the vocal point is we're getting out rather than, hey, we're opting in because we see the benefit. We see that accommodation. We want the education to accommodate our particular needs.
Well, and we beat this up so many times, I don't know if there's much new to say, but I do strongly believe that a school, and I talked to the folks in Box Elder some months ago, and Darren in his past life, about being able to notify parents that there was another option. And I told them, and I still believe this, that consistent with the language that Dave has just talked about, not just the spirit of what he's talked about, but the language, that it's appropriate for a school to say, here's an option for you. And they could do it as a school-wide informational piece. The teacher could provide the information. I don't think that is at all inconsistent with what the law says. And I think, in fact, it promotes, again, that true parent choice.
Just quickly, and I just want to clarify, because I understand your concern as a parent, that kids are getting this and they could feel bullied if a teacher is advocating for one way or another. And I just want you to know that when I discussed it, and I think when most teachers do, it's informational. We inform rather than advocate for something, because I think a lot of kids would like information. It gives them more power. So I just wanted to tell you that.
Well, you're such a nice person, so I
Well,
know that
you're a nice person too. Say it again.
I love her buddy.
No,
I know you're not a bully teacher, but I just am.
Okay.
So I want to ask you a question, because we have some districts that are taking, because you're basically saying it's a fundamental right based on statute that says a parent can't, so that if I am understanding your legal interpretation, if this weren't here, you're saying that they could make this request regardless, and I'm guessing you're getting that based on the statute that says a parent has the primary responsibility.
Exactly.
So I want to ask you this, because I really am struggling with local districts that are completely circumventing and finding a loophole in the law that somebody amended, one of the legislators amended the opt-out law to specifically state state test. And so now we have districts that are choosing to add another standardized test to their testing schedule, and they are not allowing parents to opt their student out of that test because it is not a state mandated test. And I would argue that it was always the parent. Scott and I have a struggle here.
I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Well, I'm having the same thing.
I really don't like this.
It's all like just fine.
I know, I'm sure. Well, I'm going like this. You guys are on a roller coaster. Anyway. Sorry.
I'll duck.
Where was I?
No, you're talking about,
Okay,
they were using
would
the
you
quote
say
loophole.
that they can still use that fundamental right? I'm like, a district, if you really don't want your child to take a test, they can't physically force your child to pick up a pencil or click on a keyboard and take a test. But our district is pulling kids. They say, we don't care how many times you keep them home, how many times you tell them they are not taking that test, we will test them. And I think that is wrong, ethically wrong, because the school district is coming between the parent and the child's relationship.
Well, think about this, and I'm coming to this because I think the law is essentially based on the Americans with Disabilities Act, which is reasonable accommodation. What it is a reasonable accommodation really implies that you're going to sit down and you're going to negotiate. And you're going to arrive at something that is going to be reasonable for both the administration and for the child. And if you have a child who is test sensitive, say, and you go and sit down and say, hey, look at this test will drive my child crazy. I would prefer could we do something else to demonstrate competency? And if the school refuses to do that, I think the school's got a huge problem. But I think that the opposite.
Parents call me crying.
No, I was going to say, but even within the statute itself, the statute does have limitations on the reasonable accommodation that says that it can't impose an undue burden on the school and on the employees. It tries to cut back to say, look, there are limitations to within that discussion of what is reasonable, because what's reasonable to me may not be reasonable to somebody else. Right. But it does give you some parameters in which you can do that.
Well, and I do say that the statute does say state test. However it was finagled, but it says state test. And I think if we were to look into the case law of teachers being able to evaluate students and that being meaningful, and a teacher having the right to do that in an academic setting, I think there would be case law that says teachers have the right to do that. And if students and parents are so traumatized by that or so troubled by that, and I'm not trying to use a word that's unfair, but if they don't like that, then there's an option for them. They can homeschool their children. And let me just finish my thought, and then I'd love to hear his. But I really think that it's important to maintain a teacher's right to evaluate students, and then sequentially for the school to know how the teachers are evaluating their students, and for the taxpayers to know that their students are not just taking a shotgun approach to evaluation, but that there is some consistent evaluation that gives all of us knowledge about how well our children are doing.
And that's a very interesting, different piece of this. My first question is this, is when you're saying you're now going to hang your hat on whether it is a state test. I would be interested, this goes back to a legal analysis as to what is a state actor. Is the district acting as its position within the state? Its authority comes from the state. And so you look at it and you say, well, can you now make a differentiation and say, well, this is just a district test, not a state test, and whether that is a meaningful distinction.
That's an interesting question. I think that I'd look at the plain language and we call them state tests, and they're the
But I do think, when you say the plain language, oftentimes when you say the state, you're thinking of anything that is administering a governmental authority. So rather than saying, because the authority really does ultimately for education comes from the Constitution, it comes from the state. And so then it's all delegated back down through based on what the legislature has enacted. So I'm not sure you can hide behind well, this is a district test, this is a school test and not a state test.
But
I
then
think
you
there-
caught
I
up
think
in
there'd be
the you caught up in the puzzle of teachers not being able to evaluate at all.
No,
because
see,
everything.
No, see, and that's a different piece, but I really appreciate that, Carol, because, you know, one of the things that I've always, I've come out of higher education where the mantra is academic freedom. And yet, when you step into the K through 12, it's like academic freedom just disappears.
Right.
It's not even.
Well, not entirely, there's still considerable.
No, I know, but it's not the real focal point of it. But anyway, I think I think that's a wonderful discussion.
Put your idea down. I think that's what I have. Thank you.
I have to absolutely say, this is a point of privilege, that I love having these discussions, because it really helps us see, I think it helps all of us grow.
Mhm.
So these discussions are so important. Within it, there's the clarifying piece about, the obligation of a teacher and what it is that they're required to do in a classroom to be able to evaluate. I was thinking during this conversation of our principals that were here earlier, that we're looking at data and delving into data to be able to inform their instruction, to be a good teacher. And so in my mind, part of this discussion kind of went back to the classroom about how a teacher is informed to help each individual child to maximize their abilities to do their very best in the classroom. And so those are some questions that go along with this, that aren't really a part of the theory, but that are a part of the day-to-day work of a teacher, that I think makes this even a bigger conversation. But if I were to bring us back to what needed to be done today, the action item is, the first is a discussion on the legal theory behind the parents' rights and what's placed in Rule 404. And then the other part is an action to be able to move forward, possibly or not. And that's, if you look at the R277404 options PDF, and on that, this can kind of guide our discussion today, which is, and this isn't all the options. Tiffany did a really good job of kind of looking together to say what are the options. This doesn't mean all of them, and we can make this more robust, of course. But one, do nothing with the rule as is, and offer no guidance documents. And so just to be able to say, everything in there right now is subject to interpretation. And we kind of had a really good, robust discussion on what that looks like from Board Member Ellis and, Gravitt and Lear and Kennan, is the different input that we get from our LEAs to say, this happened, this happened, this happened. And if we have a guidance document perhaps that can be agreed upon, then we can take action against an LEA who's doing, or a teacher who's doing something inappropriate. And if they're doing something inappropriate, I mean, perhaps that's why it would go down to the bottom option is clarify the policy and testing ethics manual, to not be able to advocate for something, but just to be able to inform. And what would that look like? And these things would actually be going forward, because we can't do anything right now unless we issue a guidance document. But in moving forward to make it ready for the next testing cycle, then these are some of the things that we could do or you could do as a board to move it forward to be more clear next time for the next testing cycle. So really what we need for now is to be able to say, kind of what Darren was saying, do we issue some sort of guidance document like we were talking about the previous rule? And if so, would you like for Darren to create something to go along with the last discussion when you were saying we have some to look at that are side-by-side comparisons? So we have this one for 700 and we have one for 404 that we could have examples of during that same discussion to make it more robust. Would that be something we would need to have? And then, of course, guiding back to the rule or guiding back to a local decision for this year. And then moving forward for the next year, here are some possible things that we could do to make it more clear or to do something different for the next year. So in moving this forward, what I was just kind of trying to say, where do we need to go from here?
Okay, are there thoughts on where to go from here? Lisa?
Sorry, I have a couple thoughts because I've been waiting a while. So first of all, I want to clarify. Shoot, I'm gonna have to just move to the amendment portion because I just want to clarify because I'm like writing down keywords and I'm like, where was that going? I am not referring to a teacher's ability to test a student when I'm talking about what's happening at district level, the district level test. It's another standardized test, the NWEA. It's a high stakes test that they're using and they're not allowing parents to opt out of. If a parent puts a child in school, I think it's unreasonable for them to ask a teacher to say, you can't test my child in the classroom. I am not a proponent of that, and I don't want to misinterpret. I
That's
don't want
right.
anyone to
That's
think
right.
that that's what I'm
I
doing.
thought that's what you were saying.
I
was like, not sure how we're
I
gonna do
think
that.
that's ridiculous, and if you put a child in a class, you need to expect that they're gonna be tested by the
Right.
teacher. I'm not a fan of high stakes testing, I think we put way too much stock in that. And because parents are opting out, our district has implemented another high stakes test, and they are not allowing any opt-outs at all. And I think that's why I'm asking you, I think that a parent still has the fundamental right to opt their child out of a test, whether it says state in there or not. Okay, so then my other question is, I would like to make, I'm not ready to make a motion yet because I want to see the best course of action. I would like to see a guidance document implemented for this testing year to help parents that are getting told that this will be graded now, to make sure that there's clarity there so that if a child comes home and.
Just to clarify, Lisa, what will be graded? What will be?
The SAGE test would be used in their grade. That's what some students, or, I'll have to go out and figure out exactly where it is.
But only if they opt in,
Right,
only if they choose.
right, but that's what they're being told. As kind of a scare, the kids are feeling scared
At
about
least
that.
in some places.
Yeah.
And then, anything any of us say is never everybody ever, so I don't know that it needs clarification.
Well, it does to me, because I wanna always keep that.
It's fine, because, everything you say is in some cases, everything I say is in some cases. But then the other question I have, because I don't think an amendment I propose would pass in this committee, and so I don't know that I really wanna waste my time, and if board action could be taken in the full board meeting if I didn't make an action item. So I'm looking for a Robert's Rules parliamentarian for me.
I've got the sheet right here.
So,
I wanna
you
strike
want
it
to
because
make,
of unless we can.
and you want to, what action do you want, you don't want to take action in this?
she's
No,
saying-
I'm saying I
she
would
wants
like
to
to
strike
say that
this
we
new
do.
language. But
Possibly.
But help me, Lisa, help me with why you don't like this when it just provides information to parents.
Well, I'm okay with that, but because of how I'm hearing that it's being interpreted and
So
it's
you
being,
really wanna clarify.
it's being done as punitive, I think that, so
So you think an amendment would be more clarifying than a guidance
No,
document,
I
for
have to look and
example?
see what the guidance document
Or an
looks
amendment
like.
maybe that says a
So-
teacher cannot bully or be punitive.
I've heard too many cases, and we've had a lot of hotline calls before this rule was implemented, from parents all across the state. I don't know if you probably don't know the number of how many we received.
Patty?
Have you seen the guidance document that Darren created
I
originally?
love it.
Because if we can speak to that and then give guidance on how to change it maybe?
Did you see it? He
All I
sent
know
it.
is, I know Board Member Belknap is really unhappy with it, but.
You should look at it.
But I'm just saying, yes, so, but you're asking for a guidance document, I mean, that's one of the options here, it's
Yeah,
not
it
like
could
you
be an
wanna
issue
create a
guide,
new one.
yeah.
I don't see it in board docs, so no.
It was
No,
sent through an email.
Yeah, it was there originally, and I think board leadership asked it to be removed.
Well, I'm in board leadership and
Then it came to me that it should be removed.
Okay.
So that,
sometimes there's things that aren't necessarily discussed by the whole board leadership.
Okay, Jen.
I wish that document could have been here for our discussion.
needs to be here.
And what I would move is that I would move that we have Darren go ahead and bring that document out or revise as necessary. But I think we do option 4. We clarify the policy with the testing ethics manual, and we bring it back to look at it. But we give districts the guidance, because they're wanting it.
Okay,
Yes.
point of information.
Yes.
So Jenny is suggesting, she's talking about a guidance document, and she's talking about this clarifying the policy in the testing ethics manual.
And can we do it soon?
So what I'm wondering, so the rule is effective as of March 12th,
Right.
correct? So for this year, could the guidance documents still help and be utilized this year? And then what about clarifying the policy in the testing ethics manual? Does that have to wait
yeah,
until
so
the next round?
with changing and updating the testing ethics manual takes a couple of months, because you'll see it in committee, then it goes before the full board. So you guys review and approve those updates to the testing ethics manual annually. Our intention is that that would be before the committee in June, the updated testing ethics manual, full board in August, hopefully approved, and then given to the schools so they can train their teachers before school starts using that document.
It's in the
So-
document. Thank you.
So Jenny has a motion on the floor, and let me see if I can clarify your motion a little bit. So Jenny's motion would be to provide districts with the guidance document for this year. And do we have an opportunity to see that guidance document?
She just put it on board.
Just put it in Board Docs.
Is it on Board Docs now?
Oh, is it in the same?
Yeah, you'll have to
section?
refresh.
Yeah,
Oh.
Where's
and it
the
made
old
me completely
refresh
start
here?
over.
Refresh.
So you put it in, not in the guidance document discussion, but in the
I
forum.
haven't, yeah, I haven't changed it.
So I'm refreshing.
It's there.
Oh, so we have to log back in.
Go all the way back.
Okay.
Yeah, one of the things with this document is you'll see that there are some prohibitions are pulled out of the code and highlighted to remind teachers of certain things they shouldn't do at the bottom of page 1, which again, some of the questions that started coming into the agency, I thought these were really important key things that they needed to remember. And some of the things you've been talking about, I think you would see in this guiding document at the bottom of page 1 are pulled out, highlighted, and made clear that these are things, regardless of how you interpret this rule, that still cannot be done. One of which is that C, which says, independent of the parent or guardian, use the demonstrated proficiency of the student on a statewide assessment to fulfill a requirement in a course. So, which it sounds like that has been a concern. I've seen it as a parent. I've seen that that's been some area where the fences have gotten a little wider than your intention, and then what the rule allows for. And a guiding document, certainly, we've had lots of administrators across the state, different capacities, asking for clarification on what does that mean? How do we implement the amended change? Which I think Dave did a good job of highlighting. There's, even without this rule change, the parental rights bill, that code, Utah code, allows for this change. It allows for this to happen anyway. This essentially makes it known, and so it's an equity issue, so it's not a matter of a parent knows and those that don't know they can't take advantage of it. This is an attempt to say, from an equitable standpoint, everybody knows about this now.
All right, so I just want to go back to clarifying Jenny's motion. Now we've got this document before us. So Jenny, what do you want to happen for guidance this year with this guiding document?
Well, help me out, you guys, if you want, but for me, I would move that we send, we take a careful look at this, make sure we all approve it, and we send it right out to LEAs to be used this year.
And you mean right now, or do you mean?
I mean, like
today,
tomorrow.
Right now.
Right now.
And
Right at this minute.
This committee or
Okay,
the
so,
staff or?
Oh,
so that could be, the motion is in this committee. And then
Yeah.
the second part of your motion is to,
Update the test.
to update the testing manual with clarification that could be used next year, and that would come back to our committee in June.
Because the thing is, some teachers do read the rule, and teachers are ready to, some teachers who read the rule, they're ready to do stuff right now, and we need to know if we have permission to go ahead with this. Are we bound by if our district says, no, what do we do? And that districts are waiting for guidance. They keep saying, waiting for guidance.
And I think this would be great.
This is perfect.
So this is the two-part, we have, the two parts, we have the guidance document for this year. We have action coming back to the committee with clarifying the testing manual for next year.
Yeah.
Okay, a discussion from Lisa.
I think it's reasonable that if we're going to highlight a parent's right to ask for reasonable accommodation, we need to highlight their right to opt out of the test without any punitive, that portion of the rule. And so in the guidance document, I would ask that that be put in there.
I agree with that.
So,
I agree with that as
where,
well.
are you referring to a specific?
Just a couple lines above.
Like where it's, and on, in addition to board rule
It
two.
needs to be a new, separate on bullet.
So
in the guiding document.
where are you?
I don't know what you're asking me.
I'm
You're
just
talking
saying,
about-
where in the document would you suggest putting it?
I don't care.
I think where it says for a student score, blah, blah, maybe considered in determining, and then it
Oh,
says,
so you're out of
an
luck
LEA
right
may
here.
not reward a
Yeah.
student, and then a student will not be penalized for opting out. Like underneath, well, it says 8, but I'm not sure why it says 8, and LEA may not reward a student for student participation.
But I think that it should also be a little more clarifying, so parents know
Right.
that some of the districts are saying before you're allowed to opt out, you need to come in and have a discussion with administration. Parents are told that in districts
Sam,
across
that's
the state.
ridiculous.
Well, it could say there is a separate form to fill out if you choose to opt out and your child will not be penalized.
Yeah, and I think your rule already prohibits requiring, I think it uses the word.
It does, but you're just
It
saying
may
I'm saying to
request.
add it to the guidance document, if you're sending this
I
out
agree.
to administrators, it needs to be added in the
I agree.
guidance document.
And we found that in the audit, that there was school boards that were required parents to come meet with someone before.
But that's not
they
required.
Okay, so, yeah, let's make this level for everybody. You know, let's have both sides
Let's
of the equation equally
So it's clear.
addressed.
There's a point of clarification, and luckily we have our interim policy advisor here.
Oh.
Just trying to make sure that we're all following what we should be doing, and Emily's helping us out as well. We're trying to get some clarification right here. If it's an action item, if we have and help me with this, if we have an action item from this committee, then it has to go to the whole board. So if we make a motion for action in sending something out, that has to go to the full board. So we go back to our previous discussion about guidance, FAQs, all of that. It wasn't decided on if something like that has to go to full board or not. That's still a part of the discussion. So what I was trying to do over here is to say, so if no action is made, that the guidance document is just sent out.
Yes,
Because both
okay.
of these things right here were both discussion items, and we could make an action item, or we could not, but I don't know what that looks like because I'm not the legal person. So we have Allison here.
We have
luckily, so
Dave
don't
this
make
week.
any
Well,
difference.
why
did Dave just leave? That's what I was gonna ask him.
So I'm gonna.
Yeah, okay.
Well, I wonder if you,
We've already voted on the rule, and then we wouldn't need to, we don't make any action.
We can take action to update testing then.
Okay,
For
so,
next year.
so, Jenny, then, so I'm
Okay,
thinking
so
parliamentary procedure.
let's hear her and
well,
then
I'm just
Okay.
wondering if you might wanna ask yourself, just step back, and if somebody like Darren or Diana, are they allowed to send out a guidance document
They are.
with a motion or without a motion? I mean, does he
Without.
need, okay, so
Without.
so if he
Yeah.
doesn't need a motion to
Right.
send out a guidance document, I mean, I agree with Emily's point that if the committee made a motion to send that out, that would probably need to go to the full board. But if it's not required, if you can just direct him to do that without formal action being taken, that was kind of the decision point in my mind that you needed to make. Does that make sense?
So instead of making a motion, can I just ask that we direct Darren to send that?
Whatever
that
guidance you
doc-
think is appropriate.
Yeah, but then the motion would be that then seek further clarification.
Let's continue to go through the documents
Yeah.
until we agree on it.
Okay. Is everyone comfortable with
I don't know
that?
if I am, because I wanna see what it says.
Yeah, I have a
That's
little
okay.
discomfort.
Yeah.
Because there's 15 people who have authority, and individually are gonna have different opinions, and then you have a body of 15 that
But we
collectively.
voted on the rule.
Right, and my anxiety, and I
There's
don't
already
want,
board
my
members.
anxiety is competing with your anxiety. That I hate that the staff is feeling paralyzed because the board hasn't reviewed every guidance document you might send out. And that doesn't sit well with me. But I do, and I like the fact that Elisa points out that it could also say that parents have the right to opt out and they can't be required to meet with the administrators, but they are required to fill out a form. And so added that to the document, and I guess I feel like that's a staff responsibility that I don't wanna micromanage.
And it has to get
I would like to be able to do that, because I feel pressure from the LEAs that we're not supporting
Right.
them.
Yes.
And part of the discussion I hear here is, I think, a consequence, maybe not, maybe there's more intentional actions out there, but I think it's just a consequence of not providing more clarity to them, which is, then they're gonna apply their own filters to what they're gonna do, right? So I would like to be able to support them more timely, but I don't want to offend my employer.
Which is many-headed.
Right. The Medusa of it.
I think it's a.
That's well put, Janet, the Medusa.
I think it's, if I may.
Oh, yes.
I just think that it's going to put you in a precarious situation, and if this committee directs you to do something that is going to upset other board members, and then you end up taking backlash on it, and so I think that is probably going to backfire. I know there's some other board members really upset about this issue, and anyway, I don't know that it's a great idea for you to send out a guided document under the direction of this committee.
Yeah, the hard.
It kind of negates the.
Yeah, what I'm trying to balance it with these consequences you're describing that are occurring.
Right, yeah, that's
And
what I
this could, so I'm trying to balance, does that outweigh the loss, I use that word,
confusion.
the loss of, with the board relationships or board confidence? I don't know, that's what I'm trying to, I do think the field has a need for support that way.
We have some people from the field.
Oh, great. Outstanding in
Terry,
the
would you
field.
be able to give us some input from the field regarding what we're experiencing here?
Okay, since I just walked in, remind me what you're experiencing.
We have the two sets of interested people in 404. So we have some people requesting to opt out, and then we have other parents who have a legal right to opt in. And we're getting questions from the fields regarding this. I don't know, maybe Linda.
Has he seen your
Yeah.
guiding
This-
document?
Not yet, this is the conflict, we're talking about that,
Right.
and then this
Okay.
guiding document that we were originally started.
I haven't seen the guiding document till right now, but, so the real issue is, I don't know that we have any data yet about who's going to request this, being able to take the test for competency. So, unless you're hearing, Darren, from the folks in the field that there's a bunch of requests for this, we don't know yet what that is. Could there be that? The answer is yes. I do believe that there are parents there that would like that information. I do think, though, that change, an LEA shall reasonably accommodate a parent's or guardian's request to allow students demonstration of proficiency on a state-required assessment, is probably going to create some challenges in the system, because right now, we've not allowed that. And so, Darren, I don't know exactly what the feedback you're getting is on this.
And the field hasn't seen it either.
Yeah,
The
so,
full board is discussing it.
you're balancing all of these things that the law requires. For example, to reward or punish a student, that can't happen. You can't have this thing affect a student's grade. I gotta tell you, that's the main reason parents and kids will want the test anyway. So figure out a way around to that grade. That's gonna happen. Independent of whatever we do with the rules here. I suspect that we're gonna have challenges with that. The requirement of a course in a course is also going to be a challenge. They can fulfill the requirement for pass, fail, or competency, but nothing else.
Okay, that's what it means to me.
Well, it's gotta be that or that, okay? Pass, or it's either competent or not, based on the rules that exist right now in our systems. How many will choose to do that? I don't know how many. I think we're gonna find out if this rule stands and stays the way it is. Linda, do you wanna add to that? I just have no clue how many will weigh into that.
I don't know either, but I think that.
There may be some.
By and large, the public trust.
Linda, come up to the table with us, please.
I think that by and large, the public trusts teachers and trusts the school system. to reasonably assess where their students are at. And given the history, I've been in on these committee meetings for a long time, the entire purpose of it was, we don't want to over-test kids. But LEAs are struggling with students and parents finding value in a state assessment that is opt-out. And yet, if an accommodation could be made and parents can say, well, if my student shows competency on this test, then couldn't that be used to show competency for this course in math, for example, and why test them again? On the other hand, if a student opts out, then they can't be excused from the final exam. I mean, that, we'll just use that for lack of a better term, for the final exam. So where the LEAs are struggling, from my understanding, is that how do parents know about this? They know they can opt out, but how are we communicating to them that they can reasonably ask to allow this assessment to be used to show competency in a given course? And if we're not allowed to, if that looks like we're punishing them, or looks like we are forcing them or bullying them or coercing them to take a test or to not take a test, how do we reasonably, because your communities are dependent upon the school to communicate with them what's going on and what's allowed and what's not allowed. So that's where I think LEAs are struggling. That's why some districts are taking the initiative and sending out information. Is it exactly accurate information? Is it the right, and not all LEAs are, but some are already. So how do we need clarification on that, so that all students kind of have some, or all parents have some equitable information as to what is allowed and what is not allowed?
Well, that's an interesting concept, equitable information. Terry?
Just to add to that a little bit, the reality here is we're trying to fix something. We're trying to create an opportunity for parents to be allowed to do something, when in reality what they wanted all along was to have the kids take the test, to have it made towards something meaningful at the end. And I don't know why we ever go down that road.
I know.
Okay? We need to somehow get the legislature to understand that as long as we allow parents to opt out of this test, as long as it cannot be used for a grade, as long as it cannot be used for those kinds of things, then we're basically telling the kids, the parents, and in some degree the teachers, that this test does not mean as much as it needs to mean. And at some point we have to tackle this thing head on. There's lots of changes in the legislature this coming year. I've advocated, and I'll continue to advocate as long as I'm here, this board has a role to play in this. You could be saying to the legislature, we need something different, this doesn't work.
Okay, I saw Jenny first and then Carol.
So I just wanted to clarify, when you were talking about communication to parents, that's why I really like the thing that Darren made, because it's something that can be sent to parents, and it clarifies something that Terry Shoemaker brought up, which is, does this assessment take the place of the course? Well, in the rule it says fulfill a requirement, which in Darren's document it says this could fulfill the testing requirements in a course, not the whole course, but a requirement. And I think the more we educate parents, we send things home. They have to sign. We include that you have an equal right to opt out, and it will not penalize your child. But the more information we give parents, the better this is going to be. Right now, it's so nebulous.
I do like that too, because it does say
Yes.
you can opt out of the state assessment, but there's still a class test that
Yes.
you may not opt out
Clear.
of, because this is going to, I as a teacher, I have to gather data
Yes.
to show if I've taught you what my requirement is to teach you as a teacher.
My obligation.
Okay, Carol.
And Terry, I think one thing you missed when you talked about we don't know, we don't have data, what Darren's introduction was, is to say that the staff here, and specifically him, is receiving a lot of concerns from parents and from staff members and administrators that he can't answer. So he is getting concerns from individuals, and that's what
About the change to the rule.
that's
What does that
what,
mean for
that's what he's trying to respond to. But, and then my second part of my comment is, I think we have even a bigger challenge to communicate to the legislature, even one more thing, and that is, there's this tension between parent rights as regarding testing and state accountability. If I were a legislator, I'd say, I don't want to know what 75% of the students are accomplishing. I want a picture of what 101% of the students are accomplishing. I want to know how effective education is across the board, because we're putting a lot of money into it and a lot of time into it. And as long as we have this opt-out dilemma, the legislators have to be honest with themselves. They're not getting a complete picture of as imperfect as it is, they're not getting a complete picture of accountability.
Okay, I'm going to let Horace have it.
So,
come to the table, state your name, and we'll make it official.
Royce Van Tassel, Utah Association of Public Charter Schools, always fun to be among friends. I will say that the state legislature is exquisitely aware of the tensions you're talking about, the need for statewide accountability and the tension inherent in an opt-out world. And I had this very explicit conversation with Senator Milner probably 3 weeks ago, when she said that genie is out of the bottle and it won't be put back in. They looked a couple of years ago at trying to pull back to some degree on this, and Senator Milner said she has never seen more emails and more constituent pushback than when they were pulling that back. I don't see any feasible way to change that notion that there is going to be that opt-out. It's going to be there, and to think that that is going to change, I think, is political folly.
Then we just should acknowledge it.
Right, that's
So
what I'm
all
saying.
we're
It is what it is, but thinking that they're gonna
75%
change
of the
it
students are doing.
is just unrealistic.
And I don't know if they will, I just think that then we acknowledge what we've got.
Right.
And not pretend we've got 100% accountability.
And so we control what we can.
I'm going back to Jenny's motion,
Which is direction.
which is to direct staff to issue the guidance document for this year, and then to come back to us in June with clarifying information in the testing manual that could be used for next year. Is that?
Yes, just the first part, because I don't want it to be a motion, I just want the first part to just
Okay,
be direct.
So then we'll just, we'll let that direction be given as part of the committee meeting. And the motion will be to bring that committee, the testing manual
Well, no, we won't, we're gonna.
revised
It's a motion.
to the committee in June.
But she said she doesn't want it to be
Well, but we have to vote on it as a committee, right?
Yeah.
So.
Well, that's, and I guess that's a
So
motion.
then it has to go to the vote.
Well, then,
Well, can we vote on if we direct
I
stuff?
can say, I can just say that.
Do we have to vote on direction?
We have in the past.
That's
And what we talked about with
No.
Lorraine, no.
Yeah.
If you're giving staff direction,
Yeah.
you don't vote on it.
Right, yeah.
But that doesn't seem right.
And,
So we can direct staff without giving a
But
motion.
I do want to clarify, I think
I'm
that
not
the
sure.
document should be amended with the couple of sentences we talked about.
Yes.
To clearly say that opt-out is also.
Okay,
I don't
so
agree with
that is
direction.
further direction
Does that make sense?
to staff.
I don't agree with the direction, I'm sorry,
Okay.
because I can see that it's gonna cause a lot of,
What don't you like about the document?
I don't think that it is our authority as individual board members in a committee that has a very, I mean, we all can recognize that this committee slanted one direction versus the other, right? I mean, we can just put that all on the
Right.
table. And for this committee to give direction to staff to go do something when I know outside of these 5 board members, it may slant completely the other way.
But it's
then-
about a rule we all voted on as a board unanimously.
Yeah, but there's things in the guiding document, I just.
What's inconsistent with
Yeah,
the rule, maybe?
because then it
That
clarifies
would
the
help.
problem you're dealing with.
I'm a board member that asked for this rule to be brought back in. I'm a member of board leadership that asked for this rule to not be implemented until after we had the discussion as a board. Because by statute, it was it went through the process and it was going to be implemented March 12th. But we have the option of waiting until we can make a request, and this was board leadership's call, and I'm a member of board leadership that asked that this not be implemented until the full board looked on it, because 2 or more board members had asked for this rule to be reviewed.
But it was made effective. is
It
what I
was
heard.
made effective, but I'm saying as one board membership, one board member and one board member of leadership, that went against my wishes because I was outweighed, and that's fine. But I still don't agree.
You can bring
with
it back, but you
this is what this is today, but I know in this committee that any amendment I make will not be voted on.
I experienced that. That's a good,
Well, you actually voted with us a lot, so. Yes, you did.
Not on anything interesting.
So, Emily Wheeler just went to get Sid, so she can provide us further clarification on what this step has to be, so that, we can kind of figure out what to do right now.
Because he can answer questions when the field calls.
Yes, yes. So,
Without sending out a guiding document.
So.
Right,
yeah.
that's the thing, you're issuing guidance
Come
right
on,
in this room.
Yeah,
This is, can I tell you, this is the best brain power in all of your learning.
Okay.
I don't know what you've been talking about, it's created a lot of heat.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it's warm in here. So Sid, we are kind of wanting your direction to us. We have been talking about implementation of 404. And we have brought back to the committee the guidance document that Darren has begun on. We've talked about amending that guidance document to make sure that opt-out options and opt-in options are equally addressed therein. And so now we have a motion, and the motion that we want to get through is that, or to place on the table, is that we want to have clarifying information in the testing manual for next year, and we want that brought back to the committee in June. But in addition to that, we're wondering how to handle giving direction to Darren about utilizing the guidance document and amending it. Does that need to be done in a motion? Can that be done just by the committee? But so we're asking for clarification on that.
Do we have to
giving
vote on
staff
it?
direction and
I think that's been an ongoing conversation the board for the last couple of years. Do you, like, you need to approve guidance documents? Do you approve materials coming out of the office that are to support what's happening in the field? And that, you have different opinions about that on the board, and it's ebbed and flowed. Given the time frame of what the field is asking for, it puts Darren in a very bad spot, because I know the field needs things right now. So I would push this back to you as a committee to say, this is probably something the whole board should hear, and if we need to take a minute and do that this afternoon in a study
Oh,
session.
let's do that.
Yeah, let's do that.
What are, I don't know what the plan is around that, because you're official, so you
Thank
have
you,
you
that's
have an
all.
official
That's not
board
a big
member,
deal.
meaning you have committees, but I
Just
just assume since you're all together, you have the
It
ability.
hasn't been noticed as an action.
That's the question I have.
And there is a provision in the, above and you can do emergency actions.
with 24-hour
No,
notice.
with shorter than 24 hours. I just don't know if it would meet that
Would
standard.
you like me to go check with Brian?
Yeah.
Sure.
Create a notice.
Would it be an action, or would it just be approving a staff member to?
Right, because the rules
Direct
You're
are
not, it's
Yeah, the
different than
rules
action on a
affect you.
rule, it's just
No.
giving staff direction, but I think
It's-
the whole
yeah,
board
It
should
doesn't have to
probably.
be an action, but you could get a feel of the whole board.
Or
But
just, yes, go
yeah,
ahead.
and I'm just trying to decide, I think that's a great suggestion. I'm just trying to decide if in terms of the spirit and intent of the Open and Public Meetings Act. If that would be, if, well, but others do, and I don't wanna, I don't wanna completely violate people's trust by saying the board suddenly took action on this without ever letting others know that it might be. Because Tara's been here to speak and Linda's been here to speak, but, you know, would there be others here to speak on other points of view if that were noticed?
Board Member Leary, if it were given, I'm just thinking aloud here, if it were given as an information item, I mean, you still notice obviously things. It's less dramatic if it's an information item, and then if you had consternation from other board members, then the conversation might change. You really wouldn't take action, but it would be information. But if a bunch of board members say, you know what, we're really uncomfortable having this go out, then we would know what to do.
I guess that makes sense, and I think that the best option we have, if we can, is for the board to give some direction. But I think we also have to acknowledge that Darren's gonna be giving direction anyway. That'll be less explicit than we know.
Is this just refer them to the rule and say, make a local decision?
Which I'm totally comfortable with too.
They're gonna do that anyway.
Right, so we might as well guide.
So yes.
You're gonna do that anyway.
Just in the spirit of discussing.
So your direction as a committee would be to direct me to go back and add this as an information item in this schedule. I can go back and work with Lorraine, and then if there's anything we need to do about noticing, I think with information we're probably okay.
That's great.
Does that sound all right?
That's really good.
Yeah.
Okay. You'll pay me this month, I earned my
Yeah.
fee?
Half my salary.
You'll pay me as an employee of the board.
And I almost think we should read that document so that people are really clear when we bring it forward as an information, read it so it's not scary. It's just
Read it in that meeting?
Yeah, I don't know what you guys think about that, but.
Thank you.
Like with the revisions, adding the opt-out language.
See if I can get that.
Yeah.
I don't know
Yes,
where
you
she's
can
putting
come up
that on
with
the
that.
calendar.
So
You're quick.
then,
See
are
what I
we
can do.
comfortable
If
to
you
go
wanna
forward
update it
with
and send
Jenny's
it to me,
motion
I'll upload it
on clarifying the testing manual for next year?
Yes.
So that, we're to the motion.
Okay.
Further
This is just
discussion to
update
that
the
motion? Yes,
Who's updating it? Staff, and then are we gonna see it again? Okay.
yeah, it would come back to our committee in June. All right, all in favor of that motion, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay, so did anyone happen to find out if this next month, if I wanted to propose an amendment to the rule at the full board, because it seems pointless to do it in here, if that would be able to happen? When
That's
this-
part of your motion right now?
No.
She
When
said
it
she
comes
wants
to the full board, I just
procedurally.
feel like it doesn't make any sense
You-
to be doing.
Bring the rule back.
Well, I already did. The reason this is discussed is I was one of the 2 board members that asked this rule to be brought back to committee.
But the rule's not that committee for discussion, it's just
It
what's
was supposed to be.
The
But it
guidance
isn't.
You can
document.
do that in.
I know, but that's what we did last exec, so there was some misinterpretation, because more than 2 board members requested this rule be brought back for this month.
But-
So I thought this was back for
But
amendment,
I-
and it does say action
And
on
I
it
thought the bylaw said that the timing of that, bringing it back as a discretionary.
by the executive committee, which I was in the executive committee, and my understanding as well as someone else that wasn't
Was it a
wasn't
2-3 vote
participant.
or?
Sure, we don't take a
So-
vote there, but.
Is it consensus that it would be on this agenda? Because
That
it's
was
not.
that was the interpretation, but
It was my
What I missed.
understanding that, that
It's gonna
action
go to the,
that would be
Then
taken
you
would
need
have
to
to
do
be
it
taken
this
for
afternoon.
next
It
year
needs to.
because
It's
they're
not gonna apply
already,
for this year on
the
testing
rules are
anyway.
effective and
Yeah.
they're already.
So-
Right,
issued.
we
There's
knew
no
that,
rush.
no, we knew that, but Angie even recognized that
Effective.
you could stall the rule based on
Nothing we do here now.
what, based on more, it did happen. 2 board
So-
members requested this be brought back to committee.
Right.
And during the executive committee, Angie recognized that that could be a case for not implementing the rule. But the decision was made to go ahead and implement it, knowing that 2 or more, that it was going to be on the agenda for this
So what are you
month.
looking for? It was made effective.
It was supposed to be,
But
the
it
rule
was
itself,
made
it's in,
effective.
why is it not, yes, it was made effective, but the rule is in here for discussion, why are you saying that it's not in here for discussion?
Well,
404. I mean, we made the request that this be brought back to committee, yeah.
Yes, please.
So, clarification of actions between that committee and here was, Chair Huntsman was going to follow up with board members and then make that final request of whether it was going to be stalled, I think is what we called it, or if it was going to be moved forward to this committee. And then we got the additional guidance from him to move it forward to this committee. And so that's why it's in this format, which is for this year, since it was then filed
Yes.
on March 12th, then that's something that it couldn't even impact this testing cycle. So
Right.
that's why it's, here's discussion of what the guidance document for now
I
and
get
then
all
the
that.
action. So, I think that's the point of, for the next
But the
time.
rule could be amended right now for the next time, not for this testing season.
Right.
That's not what I'm saying.
Right, and so that's where those 4 options were in there, is to say, are those 4 options you want to look at, or more options? So I thought that's the way that we were actually heading, is here's, I think one of those options is amending the rule.
Yeah, the third
So
one down is.
Yeah,
So
and
my
that
question
is what we're
is,
doing
when it
here.
comes to
Yes.
the full board.
So you could have made a motion to
Right,
do
but
option 2. Sorry.
I'm not, I understand I could have made an amendment here and I still can if I choose to, but my question is, when it comes to the full board next month, sometimes rules don't pass and the board still has the authority as the board to make amendments on the floor. And so that is my question. I don't want to bind my hands by not making an amendment here that I feel is futile
I see.
to be able to do it when I feel like,
You can make an amendment.
right.
Yes.
It would be more worth
Sorry,
my time.
misunderstood
I don't
your
want to
question.
waste
Yeah,
people's
I got
time
it.
here
Yeah.
when I know it's pointless.
We just wanted to make sure we were following through what you had asked.
Oh, you
So,
did?
yeah.
Okay, I'm going to move us on because we are running out of time. And we have still at least a couple of items on our agenda. So 3.4 is school accountability. And let's see, I have two issues on this one. Okay.
There's 2 in here and they're both fun.
Okay, late
You're like-
reporting of school accountability necessitated by change in assessments. And so Darren, I believe,
Which one are we on?
What number is it?
Let's
3.4.
and open up the attachment called school grading considerations.
This is 3.4.
Yeah, so we have 2 parts to this. One is about delaying the release of school accountability, and the other issue is about whether or not to assign letter grades.
I
So-
talked to
Scott.
Representative Owens this morning about this at length on my way up here, about the school grading. And he felt like that, and I agreed with him, because I want to do away with it. But he said that he was asking me if the board felt like there was enough clarity to eliminate school grading in the bill. And so that's something to consider. I was not, and it probably should have been when we talked about it, so I'd like to hear what you have to say about
Okay.
that.
Do you want to address the school grades first, Darren? Do you
Yeah.
want to address the
So-
timeline?
Yeah, the school grading, the decision, I think is good to start with. In the code, and I guess that's the legislator you spoke with, is the one who wrote this.
Right.
You miss it.
They allow,
Have to be a counselor at Judd High School.
He wrote the amendment.
There you go.
okay.
So which attachment do you want us to look at with you?
I asked, let's start with school grading considerations.
Okay.
Where I tried to identify in the statute where they allow you the authority to skip this year, this fall, giving administering school grades or distributing school grades. And then it also, in that top paragraph, lists that the board can abstain from assigning overall rating during a school year in which the board determines it is necessary to establish due to transition to new assessments, which you're widely aware of. We've got 2 new assessment systems that we'll implement next year. A new baseline to determine student growth. So we've got, you're in a position where you can just on your own decision, just in the fall, in the 17-18, which is this school year. So this fall, you're not required to assign school grades at all. Then, in addition to that, any year that you decide that because of the new assessment systems, we have to get the new baseline, which I give some points there of why that's probably likely to happen the next year. You also can choose to not issue school grades. Many people would say, no brainer, right? No grades, no grades. Lots of people feel strongly about letter grades. And so I've listed in there some bullets of things that to consider. And probably the biggest one is I'm not sure if the political powers that granted this, how they'll respond to 2 years in a row of not issuing letter grades. Because it's likely if you decide not to issue letter grades this fall, the next year, the technical ability to do that will be inhibited, and you'll execute the authority you have as well to not issue letter grades that year either.
Scott, do you have a thought on that?
I do. I hate school grades because I think it's more like school shaming. I don't think it's a true representative of the intellectual ability of the kids or the teachers or anything else. I had this conversation with a principal of mine that I said, because our school, my high school, our teacher, we do pretty well. And so we had talked about this kind of at length, and I had a friend that taught at Spanish Fork, or maybe it was at Payson. It was at Payson. And Payson didn't do, their school grade was not nearly as reflective as actually as good as the school is. But I said, you know what, if I guarantee if we took our staff and replaced Payson staff with Maple Mountain staff, went through the year, the school grades would stay the same. I was like, so, you know, I just don't think it was productive or effective in student learning or anything else. So I'm okay with, I would prefer not to have school grading for a year, and if we have to do it for 2, that's fine. You're going to see not a lot of new leadership within the legislature, and from a lot of representatives that I've talked to, which there's quite a few, I don't think that there's going to be a qualm with that. I mean, I could be wrong, and they could come out and say, yeah, they could come out and say, oh, hey, you guys aren't doing it for 2 years, and then implement something. But for now, I'm very much in favor of saying, let's not have school grading this fall, or quite possibly the next fall.
Would you come to the table and you'd like to give input on this?
I'm Karen Peterson from the governor's office, but I just wanted to share maybe a piece of context that wasn't included in your considerations that I would like you to be thinking about. And that is, I'm really excited about all the work you have done on the dashboard, what's coming this next year. It looks really great. And one of the conversations we had when this bill was being discussed 2 years ago, and that the board was going to move that direction, was if we leave the school grade on, is all the work that the board has done to make this comprehensive going to be recognized in the field, or is it still going to be everyone's looking at a grade? But you're creating this space now where they can drill down into all of these factors, and I mean, it's a really great place where you've moved to. But will the focus remain on a school grade the first year that new dashboard comes out? And so I want you to be thinking about that, because I think that you're going to have more people invested in what you've done if you can remove that grade. And that's what we talked about with this bill, was that the board is moving towards the direction and responding to what they're hearing in the field. And I want people in the field to see that change. So it's just something to consider as you're thinking about that where you want the attentions to lie this fall when you roll out that new dashboard.
Karen, thank you for the.
Yeah, that is something.
So the action item associated with this topic is the next attachment called optional language for rating schools. Allison is in the process of rewriting the ARC 277-497, and that'll eventually come before this committee maybe next month with some of that language. This gives us a heads up of what language you would like us to include in that. Option 1 would be that you want the superintendent to assign an overall grade in 17-18, and option 2 would be that we may not assign an overall grade in 17-18.
And I'm sorry, Darren, was this the optional language for rating schools?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, you'll see an option 1 and an option 2 in there. So this page looks really simple. And,
Oh, yeah.
That does. So, is there,
Do I need to make a motion?
so, I'd love to have you make a motion.
I move that we adopt option 2.
Option 2, which says, for the 2017-18 school year, the superintendent may not assign an overall rating to a school.
Correct.
Okay. There's a motion on the floor. Do we have discussion to the motion? Okay, seeing none, we'll place it for a vote. All in favor of option 2, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. It appears unanimous. Thank you, Darren. So we'll
Go to
move.
part 2 in there.
Yeah, we have.
Nice.
That's the only thing that we all agree on.
Not the only thing.
No, I'm just kidding.
Okay,
It's
then
not
we
the
have
only
the rollout of the assessments and the timing issue.
Yeah, this one may not be controversial either. As we adopt new standards and implement those, it necessitates a change in assessments. And the change of assessments, then you have to go through several processes to be able to obtain the valid and reliable data from those assessments, both at the individual student level and at the school level. With the recent adoption of the 6th, 7th, and 8th grade science standards, that means this year we're field testing the items that are associated with those standards. We will not have instantaneous scores on the science for 6th, 7th, and 8th grade because after they complete their questions, we continue to work with AIR all the way through October, doing the standard setting and several other processes. So we won't have data for 6th, 7th, and 8th grade science, which is a portion of the data used for school accountability, right? And grades are part of it, and we've already decided grades aren't going to be there, but we still have school accountability, which is what was referenced about this new report card. We're going to have all this other ways to look at the data. Because of that, we have a couple of choices. We could delay the issuing of school-wide accountability measures, which is similar to what happened with the language arts and math standards when they were adopted 5-6 years ago, somewhere in the past. And so schools just knew we'll get our data later in the school year. You could choose to release a differentiated report. So schools that don't have 6th, 7th, or 8th grade in them, we could calculate and distribute their school-wide accountability measures. One thing to be cognizant of, though, is item B under considerations. This was shocking to me. And I've worked in Utah schools for over 21 years. There are 21 school configurations in our state. So there's a lot of schools that are impacted if we say we won't report accountability measures for any school of 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, which could lead to confusion in the field, both parents and educators. Why did so-and-so school get an accountability score? Their data's out and ours isn't, right? Another option, which hasn't been proposed here at all, and we talked about it briefly, would be to remove the science from the accountability measures. And when we met with APAC, that one didn't receive much support at all. And APAC's recommendation to you, which is they are your committee, their recommendation is that you release school-level accountability to LEAs on the 26th of November, 2018, and that gives them a couple of weeks to review that and identify any errors, and we can fix those if possible, and then do the public release on December 10th of 2018. The group that's maybe most impacted by this are the Title I schools that are receiving assistance or flagged for target assist. You'll see under item E there, the director of Title I, Rebecca Donaldson, and then I also met with Title I directors at their most recent meeting, statewide meeting. They were supportive of that decision, or that recommendation. Obviously, you guys will make the decision. So that's APAC's recommendation to the board, is to delay for this fall the accountability release to the public.
All right, so I'm going to put a motion on the floor that we agree with the APAC recommendation to release school accountability results for fall of 2008 in accordance with what they get. The schools get them November 26th, and they would be public December the 10th.
Correct.
Correct. I think that's much less confusing for everyone. So there's a motion on the floor. Is there discussion?
I just have a question. So the field test, this didn't go out to all. You selected certain to be like the test.
Yeah, so all of our items are new this year, and so it's labeled an operational field test. So every item that's being tested across 6th, 7th, 8th grade science is new, and so we've got to do the psychometric work. Some of those items might even get tossed eventually because they're proved to not differentiate or give us any value. And so the operational field test is statewide, grade 6, 7th, and 8th
so
science.
all teachers?
Yeah.
And were there any tests? I'm not thinking of like pen and paper tests, but any random sampling tests?
Sorry.
I'm trying to think of how to word this, but did you randomly select any teachers that had to give a test that they didn't realize was being kind of like a test case scenario?
No.
So every teacher was this field test, and then did they have the opportunity to give feedback on how the test was implemented, or how they felt the test went?
Scott, I don't know if you want to talk about that, what the process at the end of the science test. Scott's our specialist for science and has been a key figure in helping to develop these items. I don't think we have a formal process. We have open communication through assessment directors in my office directly, and then the specialists, the state science coordinators meet regularly. And I assume there's a discussion at that level. I don't know if there's another way that we get feedback from teachers related to the statewide assessment, though.
We get feedback in several places from teachers, from the starting point when they write it, to the content review the teachers take part in. When we after the test has been fielded, I'm sure I'm going to get a lot of feedback from not just teachers, but also from the help desk of any issues that come up, because we've been telling teachers if there are any issues to notify the help desk, so we get a ticket and keep track of that and get accurate data in terms of what problems there are. We'll bring teachers in for the rubric validation, where we look at the scoring of the test to make sure it's scoring properly, and they'll make recommendations on changing the scoring based on how students assessed it. And we'll bring in teachers for the data review to look at how all subgroups are accessing the test to make sure it's equal and valid and reliable for everyone.
Okay. So I guess, let me rephrase, were the teachers given practice tests with these new standards on the platform?
Yes.
And was that statewide, or was
Yes.
that a handful?
That was
statewide.
It is self-selected though, so we don't require them to participate in the practice test with their students. They would choose to do that if they want to.
We had actually 2 platforms for that. We had a series of, a couple of practice tests in each grade that went out on the SAGE platform, and also sent out a link for other practice tests where they could see similar grades and items. They'll get a little bit more diversity in terms of the item type. Kind of like our training test that we used to have on the portal. We no longer have a training test for the new standards. We just have the practice one. So we had a sample cluster site that's published, that's open for anyone. Say any stakeholders can go to. And same with the practice clusters. You don't need a login to the SAGE portal to use it. We've had some schools, even at parent-teacher conference, have their kids set up with computers to show the practice clusters to the parents as they come in, so the students could show this is what we've been learning in science.
Okay. Can I follow up? And what was the feedback from that practice test?
The feedback so far from the practice cluster has been mostly positive. We've had some feedback that there were like wrong answers, but when we showed the teachers, actually, we were asking for example, evidence to support a conclusion, that we would never put a false statement as evidence, because that would lead them to key for the wrong answer, the right answer anyway. But the feedback, I just spoke with one of the principals, our Title I principal that was here from Kane County today. He teaches 6th grade, and he mentioned on the way out that he was really excited about teaching science, that he was really excited to see the clusters and have his kids be able to engage with those, and that was a very good experience for him.
Right, so I was referring.
Okay, this isn't to the motion, and we're running out of time. This is more, the motion is about releasing the school accountability results and the time.
Right, but I wanted to ask about that.
So I was gonna say, maybe you'd want to get together and you can go more into depth of that. Is that okay?
Mm-hmm.
All right, so I'll put the motion again on the floor to accept the release of school accountability results for fall of 2018 in a delayed manner, but where all results are released at the same time. All in favor say aye.
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 Thank you.
Thank you.
Aye, yes.
Then we have one more issue, and Leah Voorhees, you've been waiting a long time. So what we are looking at here is the the extended core science with engineering education, the SEED standards for children with significant cognitive disabilities, grades 6 through 8. So the SEED standards were accepted earlier, and now we're putting these into place for those with significant cognitive disabilities. Lee, you told me this was a very small group of students, and we'll let you go ahead and present this.
So the process we went through, we're in exactly the same place that David was presenting to you about the leadership standards. So we presented the proposed standards in December, And then we went out to the field to get stakeholder feedback about the proposed standards. We received the feedback, and then we have a leadership committee for these particular standards made up of teachers and administrators of students with significant cognitive disabilities. They reviewed all of the feedback. We received 9 pieces of feedback to make changes. 2 of them were related to word choice. 7 of them were content related, specifically related to verbs. How would the student, what action would the student have to take to demonstrate knowledge? So understanding versus recognizing. Okay, so those were the content changes. The leadership committee reviewed all of the feedback and made those 9 changes to the standards. And in front of you, you have the updated standards. So just like David, I did exactly the same thing he did actually. So we have all of the paperwork to demonstrate the process used to receive feedback. Like I told you in December, we had in-person meetings across the state. We also had an online survey and received the feedback. So for 6th grade, we had 20 LEAs and 30 respondents. For the 7th grade standards, we had 10 LEAs that responded, 19 people responded. For the 8th grade, we had 9 LEAs that responded and 14 people. Parents in each group responded. And so you see in front of you the proposed standards. So just like David, I would recommend that you accept the proposed standards and send them to the full board for approval.
Okay, and just, these standards will affect approximately how many students?
4,000.
About 4,000 students, and that is what percentage of the?
1%.
1% of the students with disabilities. Okay, so we have.
No, it's not 1% of the students with disabilities. Is that right? 1%. 1% of the total students.
Students, yeah.
Yeah.
And so the standards are only for students with significant cognitive disabilities.
Okay.
And how we judge how many students, we don't actually keep track of that.
Okay.
Of the number of students accessing the standards. What we keep track of is the number of students who take the alternate assessment, right?
Okay. And so that number is about
4,000. What's the exact number, Tracy?
Around 45.
Okay.
And just,
That's fine.
do the students opt out of this often?
Not very often. We do have some, but not very often. The majority of students take the alternate assessment for science and the dynamic learning maps for the ELA and math.
Okay. So let's put a motion on the floor that we approve the alternate science standards for grades 6-8 and recommend approval to the full board. So is there discussion to that motion? Okay, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
It's unanimous, Leah.
I also made an email with this information to send to Sherry, to send to you. Would you like that?
Yes.
I figured,
Yes.
so I have it ready to go.
Thank you. All right. We're 1 minute over our time. I'll accept a motion for. Carol? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
But I'm concerned because I sent him a special meeting and the guy was telling them, like, it really discouraged them opting out.
Oh.
Making the parents so scared that if they opt out, they're not gonna get
They want to be as many numbers as they can. They just need to be armed with it so they can say no, because I'm reading the rule.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, another day. This is why the big money is paid, right?
You earned every penny, thank you.
I lose money.